Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Monday, everybody. And today with us is Sean Davis. And we have our first episode of the RTCF in the offseason. We're going to cover a bunch of different topics today, Sean. We're going to be talking about top targets in the 2027 class. We're going to be talking about, biggest concerns, biggest reasons for optimism for this 2026 football team. And then we're going to kind of give a recap of the riveting college football playoffs that we saw this past weekend. But before we dive into all that, Sean, the news just broke that Notre Dame and USC, that annual rivalry that was rich in tradition, is now coming to an end. And it likely will until at the very earliest 2030, or if USC makes the playoffs. We'll see if that happens. But that's really going to be the next time that they meet up. So, Sean, a lot to cover today. Happy Monday. It's almost Christmas. How you doing, my man?
Man, I'm doing great. If I don't see everyone until the holiday or before the holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and your entire family. Nothing but eternal blessings and favor upon all of you.
Well said.
Yep.
Very, very well said. Yep. And quick reminder for content for us at Irish Breakdown. Here we have the show today. And then obviously IB Nation Sports Beat is live. If you haven't got enough of me yet today, I'm also going to be filling in for Vince again tonight on IB Nation Sports Beat. So that'll go live a little bit after 5. And then Brian and I are actually going to be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. And we're going to have a fun little twist on the show coming with the holidays coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you're not going to want to miss tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then we're not going to have shows Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week with it being Christmas. I know some people are traveling. I'll be traveling quite a bit. So all the more reason to be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That helps you stay in the loop with everything. So Brian also danced around with the idea of potentially putting out some individual videos on some of those days. So content will always be coming your way, but from a live show perspective, that's what we have going on for you guys this week. But Sean, let's kind of dive into this whole thing. And where we're going to start is with the Notre Dame-USC rivalry. Ross Dellinger broke the news from Yahoo Sports and announced that this long-standing historic rivalry has come to an end. Now, we have had discussions on the air and off the air about how we kind of assumed that this was going to come to be. The second USC decided to leave the Pac-12 and play a big role in their demise and go over to the Big Ten, we had a feeling that this could potentially be one of the, I guess you could say, the casualties of this. And unfortunately, it was the next one. It was announced today. And the earliest that it sounds like they're going to try to restart negotiations for this and get the game back on an annual basis is in 2030. It's shocking news. Big picture, I love how Notre Dame handled this, because USC tried to demand everything on their terms, and Notre Dame and Pete Bavacqua stood their ground, which was something that we were a little bit concerned with. Not that we didn't think that Pete Bavacqua didn't have the chops. We just didn't know, right? We didn't know how he was going to handle this situation. So, Sean, initial thoughts when this news broke, where are you at right now with it?
Really, the fans, the players currently and in the future, and past players for both sides are the ones that are truly damaged by this, right? You talk about the history going all the way back to Newt Rockne, the history of, this being set up, traveling out to California to market, sell the brand, build the Subway alumni, build the fan base. All of that is background. This is about Jen Cohan trying to make her mark as the athletic director for USC. That's at the core of this, right? Notre Dame is in a position, as you said, with Pete Bavacqua. You guys questioned and talked about it. You questioned how he would handle it, and you talked about appreciating the way he's handled it. But this is about athletic director Jen Cohan trying to leave her mark and move. She's always been trying to move USC away from its traditions since she's come in. She led the charge for them to leave the Pac-12, which a lot of people had an issue with the way they left the Pac-12, right? Now, to pick up the trend, there was a problem with the way you left the Pac-12. Now you get to the Big Ten, there's a problem with the way you approach Notre Dame, wanting everything to be advantageous for you. Then you get to the Big Ten, and while you're not even a top contender in the Big Ten, you're out here trying to beg for more money. as if your brand, regardless of what happens on the field, your brand is big enough to require that we get a bigger slice of the pie. This is all about Jen Cohen and what she's been establishing and the way she's been operating. And it's Notre Dame, and the end of this rivalry is just another example of how poorly, not the decisions. I think moving to the Big Ten was the right decision for USC. It was the way you went about it. I think because of the 9-game schedule coming, there should be a discussion about the scheduling of the Notre Dame rivalry and how things could change to help one another. You don't want to have Notre Dame at the end of the year because of the tough schedule in the Big Ten, conference-wise, and the possible championship game. I get that. Let's talk about it. Don't come to us and demand what you think needs to happen. Have an open conversation about how can we make this better for the both of us moving forward in an ever-changing landscape. She didn't do it that way. And then, like you said, trying to partner with Michigan or being the two loudest voices of schools, claiming that they deserve more pieces, a bigger piece of the pie with Michigan. She's just trying to make her mark as the 10th AD at USC. And unfortunately, the rivalry with Notre Dame got caught in the wash. And I appreciate, like you said, the way Pete Bavacqua and Notre Dame have held their ground and stood fast and believe that, you know what, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate. And like I said, the fan base, the former players, former coaches, and the current players and future players are the ones that are hindered the most by this decision. But outside of that, from a business standpoint, USC got what they wanted. And from a business standpoint, like I said, I understand the decision. I just don't like the way you went about it. And I definitely like the decision that Notre Dame and Pete Bavacqua made to stand their ground, and the business decision that they made, because I think that the whole, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it, Trev, from a perception standpoint, I don't know if even this year, people were like, so what? You beat USC. USC isn't a good team. That was said even this year. And I'm trying to, when was the last time a win over USC meant something for Notre Dame from a national perspective? When was the last time a USC win meant something?
It's been a minute. I mean, first year that comes to mind is probably 2017.
Yeah.
That was a big win, but
Trev, that's rivalries, though, right?
Yeah.
The rivalry means more to the two schools and the fan bases than what everybody else outside is saying. That's why rivalries are so important. It didn't matter that Auburn had a terrible season. They were on the verge, or they had fired their head coach. It was Auburn, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter that Michigan was getting ready to lose their head coach and had a terrible season. It's Ohio State, Michigan. It's Notre Dame, USC. All the rest of that stuff is ancillary. We can figure that out on the move. This is bigger than everything. And unfortunately, you have a new athletic director that's so caught up in the advancement of the business and moving away from those traditions and what they mean to the fan bases and the players. And this is what you get. Unfortunately, this is what you get. But I can't speak to the last game that Notre Dame needed. Like, we need this win over USC. Maybe 2014, 15?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, look, the frustrating thing about this is it's twofold. One, I agree with everything that you said about USC's athletic director. This also falls on Lincoln Riley as well. The athletic director can't be this strongly influenced by the head coach to run away from this rivalry. And we've seen Lincoln Riley has a history of doing this. He doesn't want actual competition. Why did he leave Oklahoma when they were gearing up to leave the SEC? Because he didn't want to coach against SEC teams. Plain and simple. So he went to the Pac-12 and then played a big role in the demise of the Pac-12. And then here they are in the Big Ten. They've also succumbed to the Big Ten and the SEC conference schedules are just harder than anything else that anybody could play. So there's no way we can play tough out of conference games. Well, Ohio State did that. Alabama did it. Texas did it. Georgia's done it. Just not USC. Because here's the biggest difference. USC doesn't want to make a run in the playoffs. They just want to be there. They just want to be in the conversation. Taking quality opponents off of your schedule doesn't prepare you for any type of postseason run. So sure, you can load it up. Let's say they replace Notre Dame. And they'll probably replace them with some FCS team or low-level G5 team to try to get one more win on their resume. And that's exactly what was reported. Listen, Ross Dellinger in his article said, in fact, and this is direct quote from his article on Yahoo Sports. In fact, the two programs were on the verge of finalizing a 2-year extension of their agreement in late November, with USC agreeing to host Notre Dame next season on the traditional date after Thanksgiving and the Irish hosting in 2027. However, USC officials determined that the game date was not ideal considering past decisions from the College Football Playoff Selection Committee in punishing schools for losses, especially those late in the season. That tells me one of two things. First, you don't have confidence in your program to beat Notre Dame. That's what that tells me, first and foremost, because the flip side of that argument, Sean, is picking up a big win late in the season in November goes a long way with the playoff committee. Oklahoma beat Alabama in the regular season in November. What'd that do for them? That all but secured them a home playoff bid. And the other thing that tells me is that they're using previous history, because Notre Dame has won 7 of the last 8 matchups, and the only one that they lost was when USC had a Heisman winner at quarterback. So that tells me two things. One, Lincoln Riley and the athletic director for USC have virtually zero confidence that they can beat Notre Dame. That's what that tells me. Like, yeah, we would play at the end of the season, but like, you kind of beat us all the time, and we just want to try to make the playoffs, so we're just not going to play you. That's a terrible excuse. Absolutely terrible excuse. Why should any team, whether you're in the same conference or not, why should any team want to play a big rival at the end of the season if that's going to be a playoff stake? That is such a lame loser mentality mindset to have, is we don't want to play Notre Dame at the end of the season because if we lose, that's going to put us at a detriment of trying to make the playoffs. That's just so sad. And this is also just bad for college football in general. What sets college football apart from the rest of the other leagues, Sean? From any other football out there, it's the rivalries. And you have them in the NFL. Like, you have divisional rivalries. You know, the Bears-Packers just played this past weekend in a crazy game. Shout out to your Bears, by the way. Had to get that quick little plug in there for you. But I know there's rivalries in the NFL. But, I mean, you being a Bears fan, the rivalry is just a little bit different than Ohio State, Michigan, than Alabama, Auburn, than Notre Dame-USC. I think that's so upsetting. And now we're to the point where greed and money and all of it for TV deals and more money for conference revenue sharing, all that stuff is now taking precedent over what made this sport so great and why we all loved it. That's the most disappointing part for me. Because, look, we can have a realistic conversation about this. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is getting a bump now that USC's not on it anymore. They replaced it with BYU, a team that has been competing for a playoff spot and legitimately competing for a playoff spot the last couple of seasons. So you could argue that their strength of schedule gets a bump. Kind of a significant bump. But it's the rivalries that make this sport so special. And now another one of those is gone because of this new conference realignment stuff. Because the Big Ten felt the need to have 18 teams in it. That gives USC the ability to cover behind this. Well, we have such a daunting conference schedule and we just can't play a tough out-of-conference game. That's abysmal. Like, that's absolutely terrible. So at the end of the day, Sean, I understand why they decided to run away from this one. They've played 96 times. They've played 15 times since 2010. Notre Dame won 11 of those games. And like I said, 7 out of the last 8. Disappointing thing about this on the other side of the rivalry is when USC kind of had Notre Dame's number and was kind of dominating them in the early 2000s. Notre Dame never tried to run away from it. Hey, this is kind of hurting our chances at, competing for a BCS national title because USC just kind of works us every year. So,
and Trev, that is what rivalries are all about. A rivalry is about, we have the upper hand. Oh man, you have the upper hand. Oh, you counter us, you have the upper hand. That's a rivalry. Stanford literally has knocked Notre Dame probably out of big time bowl contention or a playoff contention when it was 14 playoff, going out there for that last game multiple times. That's part of the rivalry, right? There are days when Notre Dame, like now, you look at Stanford and you're like, oh man. But there's benefits to that relationship, benefits that allow Notre Dame to play a part in Stanford going from the Pac-12 when they didn't have a home to lining up and landing in the ACC, right? So I just think there's a respect. It's just something, especially when you change leadership. Different leaders come in, and I see people in the chat trying to absolve Jennifer. We're not. She can't be absolved from this. She's the athletic director. I don't care what Lincoln Riley is saying. The powers that work out there, Lincoln Riley might have power in the football building, but as far as making moves, as far as the school and the total of that athletic department, he doesn't swing a big stick like that. He hasn't won enough to swing a big stick like that. He hasn't. And so the moves she's made, screaming about the private equity, once she got pushing back on the TV deal, like, really? You just got in this conference. You literally just got into the Big Ten. And you come in swinging like this while your team is averaging 8 to 9 wins? Come on. You have to earn that type of respect. Michigan is coming off a national championship. And they're a long time, big time contender in the conference. I understand them taking their swing at this deal. You're just doing it based upon your brand. And I understand, like I said, the scheduling standpoint, Trev, I understand it. You made a great point. You have to be willing and have the kahunas to play big games in November. LSU, Alabama's win first Saturday in November. That they both know our season could come down to this one Saturday night in November. They're not moving that. That's set in stone. I don't care what the SEC does with the schedule as they move forward. Alabama and LSU will be playing each other the first Saturday in November. This etched in stone. So I think that goes with the territory, man. You allow rivalries to go through the ebbs and flows on the field, and rivalries go through ebbs and flows off the field as well. And you go with it, and you deal with it, and you converse about it, and you figure out a solution together to make it better for everyone else. It just seemed like to me, USC got to a point where they became dismissive towards the rivalry and never really wanted to engage anymore once it got to a certain point where they recognized that they weren't going to be able to force Notre Dame to yield to their demands. At that point, I think they felt like they built up enough equity with the fan base to say, see, they don't want to work with us. They don't want to work with our new schedule. They don't want to work with us being in the Big Ten. They're independent. They used all the excuses to form a narrative to make it a soft landing for them. And as people in the chat, it's been going on the entire season. Like the former players at USC aren't happy about this. I don't think it's really anything they can do about it, but they're not happy about this. Do I think the rivalry is dead, Trev? I don't. I think eventually, at some point down the road, there probably will be a chance to revisit it, but USC has to be willing to come to the table and relent on some of its demands. And maybe their schedule, because the truth of the matter, each Big Ten team has 2 big games a year. That's it. You play 2 big games in the Big Ten. Their big games are probably going to be Oregon, and this year it was perception-wise, it was Michigan. Perception-wise, that's not a big game. Neither of them were really good. I'm trying to think of the other Big Ten team that they played that was really good. They didn't play Ohio State. They didn't play Indiana. They played Oregon. That was it. That was it. They lost to Illinois. Like, what are we talking about? Let me stick out my chest for a second. You got beat by Illinois. So at this point, trying to scream about the difficulty of the Big Ten schedule, honestly, Trev, really is an indictment of where their program is right now. For them to be screaming as they sit 4th or 5th in the Big Ten that, oh man, our Big Ten schedule, like, dude, stop. You played one big time caliber team in your conference, and you got boat raced. The other team that you played out of conference, you got boat raced. Like, what? So that's who you are. And it's disappointing. It's just really disappointing because it goes back to, like you said, wanting to compete, right? Wanting to have that game in November. Like, yo, this is for all the marbles. Going back to Notre Dame walks into a November matchup with the quarterback for USC that is one of the leading Heisman candidate contenders. 1 versus 2 is all on the line. Who doesn't want that? Trev, who doesn't want that? This is for all the marbles. This is it. Back then, it meant more because it was strictly about the voters. Even now, it could be about seeding. It could be about getting a bye in the first round. It still will have meaning in different ways. What's your fear? What's your fear? What did we see in the Big Ten championship game? Did anybody lose respect when Ohio State lost to Indiana? In the eyes of everyone, nobody came away from that game saying, yep, I knew Ohio State wasn't good. No. Most people walked away from that game saying, those are 2 really darn good teams, man. A game in November, those are 2 really good teams. And that's the opportunity that you lose. That's the opportunity that you lose. And I would think that they will want to play it considering they always have the backdrop of the Big Ten championship. If we lose to Notre Dame, we still have a chance, if we're darn good, to get into the Big Ten championship game and get a way into the playoff because they're an independent. I'm still trying to find the negative from a scheduling standpoint. For USC, how does that impact you in the Big Ten? How? If you really believe that you're a big-time program and a good team, how does that impact you? And why are you trying to get us to take you week 1, week 2 out the box? It's like, come on. That handcuffs Notre Dame from being able to attract other big-time teams like a Texas, Alabama in the future from being a marquee matchup in week 1, because it's pretty obvious that Notre Dame is not afraid of playing a great team right out the box. They do it all the time. So you made a great point. And I've heard you and Brian talk about it. And Pete Bavacqua, who I felt, I think he's very stealth in the way he handles things, which would scare me more. That would scare me more. A person that doesn't say a lot, and you're trying to figure out what the heck they're thinking or what's going on, rather than someone that's out there just boisterous all the time.
Sure.
And you're like, okay. And we're going to get to something else. I think the way he's moved and handled things, you have to feel like he's definitely standing his ground and doing justice for the Fighting Irish in the program.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The decision of the direction that Notre Dame is going in with the Notre Dame-USC rivalry is a big step in the right direction for Pete Bavacqua as the athletic director. Because look, fact of the matter is USC continued to try to move the goalposts. Mm-hmm. What's the ask of Notre Dame down the road? Their September slate is supposed to be USC in the Coliseum, and then Alabama at home, and then a bye week, and then Texas down in Darrell K. Royal. Like, that's the ask of what USC is asking Notre Dame to do. But then USC just doesn't have to play one of Sacramento State or San Jose State or East Sacramento State A&M University in one of their week 1, 2, or 3 games, and then they just fill that in with Notre Dame. Like what are we talking about here? Yeah. But the fear was, leading up to this point, Sean, the fear was Notre Dame was just like, yeah, well, we just want to keep this going because it's great for the sport, so we'll just play you whenever.
Yeah.
And then that sets the precedent that USC is going to just be able to demand whatever from Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pete Bavacqua taking the stand, as much as I don't love it for the sport, like I don't want to have a season of a Notre Dame season without USC on the schedule.
Yeah.
It's an iconic game. The first game I ever sat down and watched start to finish with my dad was 2005 Notre Dame-USC. And that is when I fell in love with football. And now for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to get to see that. So as a fan, I really hate it. But I love the stand that Notre Dame took here because that was like, hey, look, we don't need you on the schedule. There's also this idea that Notre Dame needs USC way more than USC needs Notre Dame. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
You have SEC, you have Alabama, Florida, Auburn, Texas, all these other teams scheduling home and homes with Notre Dame. I don't need USC. Like Notre Dame wouldn't have made this move unless they were already making moves behind the scenes to have BYU on the schedule. There was a contingency plan in place. It's not a mystery that 5 minutes after the Notre Dame-USC rivalry was announced that it was gone, Notre Dame was like, all right, hey, we're playing BYU, a team that has been competing for the playoffs the last 2 years. To your point, it's a savvy move. Like that's what you have to set up.
Mm-hmm.
But for anybody who's like, people are going to be afraid to play Notre Dame, or not afraid to play Notre Dame. People are going to try to boycott Notre Dame and not put them on their schedule. It's like, what do you have to say now at this point? Like they've said,
wasn't that the Big 12 commissioner and a report that started with the Big 12 and Yormack running his mouth, talking about the way the ACC was treated by Notre Dame? That, for me, let me tell you something, man. Are we transitioning? I want to make sure we put a nice bow on the USC side. Are we transitioning over to the announcement of BYU and the series 26-27 home and home?
Yes, sir.
By Notre Dame? Let's transition to that. You see, this is what Notre Dame fans jump on social media all day because you've been taking it from the Big 12 fans. You've been taking it from the BYU Cougar fans, calling you soft, saying you're running, saying you're scared. They asked for this belt to A that's coming. They asked for it. It's coming to Provo. In 2026, you asked for it. You absolutely asked for it, and you're going to get it. But let's talk about how stealth and diabolical Pete Bavacqua has been. Because more than likely, the game in Provo will be on Fox. I love it. I love it. It's going to be a Fox game. I love it. I love it. So you guess who's not carrying it, Trev? ESPN. Oh, Pete Bavacqua, you talk about just laying it down the line. Who did he just meet with in New York? I'm sure he had this in his back pocket as he met with the commissioner of the ACC, Mr. Phillips, on Friday, where it's reported both sides left, everything was positive. Pete Bavacqua told you. Permanent damage. You know how you leave a conversation when you have an issue with somebody, Trev, and you just, you know what? It's all good. It's all good. We're straight. We're straight. We're straight. But you know, walking out like, I don't rock with that. It's done. He told you. I know everybody wanted fire and brimstone at Pete Bavacqua's press conference. They wanted him to come out there and burn it to the ground. And I said immediately, he's about to be diabolical the way he deals with this situation. And we're starting to see the first pieces of evidence of that. With the ground he stood with USC, having BYU in his back pocket, right? BYU fans, you're running from us. We're going to answer that as well. We're going to answer that. First of all, we just want to make sure that everybody knows we don't need the Pop-Tart to make this deal. We can go make a deal with BYU after your Big 12 commissioner said, and reports coming out of the Big 12 said that they were going to be frozen out. While those were circulating, here's Notre Dame behind enemy lines saying, psst, psst, psst. How about we do a home and home? How about we collect the money and keep it to ourselves? Let's benefit each other. What did BYU do? What did they do, Trev? What did they do? See, that's why Pete Bavacqua at the press conference talked about the attendance when Notre Dame's not included in the ACC and when they are included in road games. He was letting the ACC know, don't get it twisted. We know who you are. You can't hide. We bring more to you as a partial member than your whole members bring to your home stadiums.
100%.
Let's talk about it. So we don't need the Pop-Tart Bowl. In the midst of all of this everybody turning their back on Notre Dame, the team we were supposed to play, we're just going to go behind your back, pin a deal, and play both games over on Fox or NBC when they come to us. So ESPN, you'll get none of this. I said it for the last 2 weeks. When it's all said and done, Notre Dame felt like we could send a bigger message than we could ever send by going to a bowl game and winning. We can send a message across the landscape that we're still Notre Dame. Don't forget it. We're still Notre Dame. And today, just in the announcements, they made that loud clear. We don't like the end of the rivalry, but we're not going to have a problem filling the USC void. Mm-hmm. Trev, I know that's something you're like, man, I want to see it down the line. But when I asked you, what was the last time Notre Dame, from a perception standpoint, benefited from a win over USC?
Sure.
When was the last time? So
at least a decade.
It's been a decade, man. So maybe it comes back together. And at that point, maybe there's some shine on that team. So it helps us when we do defeat them. But other than that, people need to recognize, man, he's not doing it the way we might like to do it as far as being boisterous. But the way people of Aqua is moving, as they say in the hood, Trev, real gangsters move in silence, Trev. Mm-hmm. Real gangsters move in silence. And he's moving real silently.
The biggest thing that I was nervous about with Pete Bavacqua was he going to operate in a way that he understood the backing of Notre Dame, that he understood the influence that Notre Dame has. And I caught hints of it in that press conference that he talked about. There's a reason he brought up that attendance. I mean, just in the last 3 weeks, think about this, Sean. Nobody cared about the Pop-Tart Bowl until Notre Dame's name was attached to it. We can be honest about that. And then to follow that up, why do you think Pete Bavacqua started talking about ACC attendance? That was his way of saying, hey, man, people don't go to your games unless our name is attached to it. We do that. 90% of the time that Notre Dame plays an ACC opponent, it's a sellout. And that's not because every single ACC opponent they play is Clemson on the road and Louisville on the road and Miami on the road. That's also selling out Florida State. That's selling out North Carolina. That's selling out Pitt. I mean, Sean, look at the crowd difference between when Notre Dame played Pitt on the road and when Miami played Pitt on the road. That's all you got to know right there. That's all you got to know. So the thing that I was nervous about and most anxious to see was how Pete Bavacqua worked behind the scenes. Because, I mean, you can listen to him at a press conference and know that not everybody's as rah-rah as the next guy. Not good, not bad, just different. And so that gave me a little bit of pause I don't know what level of confidence I had in Pete Bavacqua. Last couple of days have been very eye-opening. And it's moving in the right direction. Now the next step is, okay, how do you start to combat more of this ACC stuff? What are you going to do as the athletic director to continue to put your football program in a position to be successful when it comes to the postseason conversation? Definitely very interesting to watch moving forward, but I love the move to have BYU and they were ready to fire that at the hip. I mean, it was the second that news broke, they're like, and by the way, we're playing BYU. I thought the move was genius. Absolutely genius.
Imagine, because I would imagine that BYU would much rather play Notre Dame in the Pop-Tart Bowl. And that relationship is a good relationship. See, this is why it's important of how you handle the people that you're in a relationship with. Something Jim Phillips can learn. Learn from this, Jim Phillips. Because you've done permanent damage to the relationship with Notre Dame because you didn't want to listen and engage and take part in a two-way relationship. Notre Dame knew, because of the relationship they have with BYU that spans decades, that BYU would be a little upset and might even feel like you left us hanging. We thought we were going to have a good matchup in this bowl game. I'm pretty sure Notre Dame said, don't worry, we got you. Don't worry, we got you. We're doing this for this reasons, but we're going to make something happen. BYU's probably like, oh, okay.
Because the selling point at that point, Sean, is easy. It's, hey,
very easy.
Face us when we're at our best.
Yes.
We want to face you when you're at your best.
Facts.
You don't want to play us when Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are sitting out.
No. And do you really want to play us in Orlando, or would you like us to come to Provo?
Yeah.
Where would you really like to play us?
Mm-hmm.
Like all the great talking points to make a deal like this were on the side of Notre Dame. And so everybody, Notre Dame's soft. No, man. They just move differently. They just move differently than everybody else. They have to. No, Notre Dame cannot maintain its independence with humility. That's it. You can't be humble and maintain your independence in an ever-changing and violent marketplace. It's a volatile marketplace right now when we're talking about college football.
Yeah.
Things are changing all the time. So you can't sit back and be humble as Notre Dame from a business, marketing, and branding standpoint. You have to be bold. Opting out was bold. Making the deal they made with BYU was bold. Taking a stance against USC is bold. And I venture to say that the future decisions, stacked or hitched to these decisions, will continue to be bold and beneficial for Notre Dame. So, as they say, as the young people say, let P eat, let them cook. Let them cook. And let's see what he comes up with.
Absolutely. We've been talking this all since the start of the offseason, since the playoff snub. That Notre Dame kind of needs to take on a villain mantra and just start to own it. People aren't going to like you regardless. So you have to move a little bit differently, like you said. That's exactly what they did scheduling BYU. Yeah, sure, the commissioner of that league can talk all he wants to about it. But they're going to go schedule one of your top teams. Not a whole lot you can do about it. Not a whole lot. And it's been signed. It's inked. Deal's inked. It's happening. Notre Dame, BYU, and Provo in 26, and then BYU's coming to South Bend in 2027. I love the move. I really do. But, folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Don't go anywhere. We are about to dive into RTCF, so we have a lot more content coming your way. But before we get there, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, in part two of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we have RTCF coming up. In the first segment, as always, is we're going to talk about a little recruiting. And there's been a lot of different questions. Now, recruiting never stops, like we always know, but sometimes it got a little bit overshadowed with the playoff snub and then the decision to sit out of the bowl game. And there's been some commits recently. But what we wanted to do today is just kind of put together a segment that kind of talks about some of the top targets. Because in every recruiting show, every commit show, we talk about what's next. And you guys ask us a lot of really great questions about, all right, who are some of the top targets on offense? Who else is Notre Dame looking for in defense? So we kind of wanted to put all of that together. We broke it down into offense and defense, and then we're going to talk a little quarterback situation at the end of this segment with Teddy Gerard reclassifying to 2026. But, Sean, let's start on the offensive side of the ball, because a lot of the recent commits have been defensively. But I think they're up to 9 in this class, and I think 5 or 6 of the commits are on defense, with Richie Flanagan kind of being a potential floater. Who knows? They have a long snapper. And now with Teddy Gerard, moving up and reclassifying. I think now the commits class is actually back down to 8, I believe. So Notre Dame's offense, they haven't signed anybody else yet, but there's a lot of heavy hitters on the board that I know that you wanted to talk about and touch on.
Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, Trev. And of course, there are 2 must-gets, especially on the tail of the 5-man haul that Mike Brown was able to bring in the 2026 class. So we start with legacy, Julius Jones Jr., the son of Julius Jones. His game day visit, and I've said this and I'll say it again, what they did with the game day visits this year was absolutely amazing. The indelible impression that they were able to make not only in 26 kids, but 27 and even extending this to 2028 kids was absolutely amazing. And they've done everything that they need to do to be in a really good position with the St. Thomas Aquinas wide receiver, who, if you watch, that's something we're going to talk about, Trev. I'm sure you're going to continue to watch the film, but the junior film on these young men in 27, they've taken major steps. Julius Jones Jr. is a much better wide receiver than he was the previous year, and we liked him then. And then you talk about Quentin Burrell, Chicago Mount Carmel. He's gotten even better. He was a big-time participation, one of the best players at the Irish Invasion this past summer. And so Notre Dame, once again, sits in great position with him as well. I talked to Quentin over the weekend, and it was interesting because I was asking him when he's going to get his top list out and what the number of teams would be on his top list. And he is pretty much stuck in limbo from a standpoint of, I think, this is my personal opinion, that his top 3 schools were, in no order, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Arizona State. And so when the news broke or was being circulated that Kenny Dillingham was flirting around with signing or being the next head coach at Michigan, I actually reached out, talked to him, but then I also talked to Brian Driscoll at the time, and I said, I think the Michigan situation allowed Notre Dame to kind of go to the forefront of his recruiting. But if Dillingham gets to Michigan, things could get really interesting, because he really likes Arizona State and really likes Coach Dillingham. So Dillingham then signed back, got an extension at Arizona State. And so Michigan is still stuck in limbo on what they're going to do as far as, getting their next head coach. I do really feel like Notre Dame is in a great position. Just talking to him, he's going to narrow down his list of schools at the end of January. He wants to take the contact period to really start to filter out the teams and figure out where he fits best. One of the things he talked about with Notre Dame is he wanted to see the passing game and big plays be a part, because he's part of a big play offense in the passing game. He's always been part of that since he was a freshman in high school. He played and contributed as a true freshman to a state championship. He's won 3 consecutive state championships doing that. So he wants to continue that in college football. And so he knew that would happen with CJ, and he saw it throughout the season progress. He saw the big plays. And so he was definitely impressed, and he thinks he's going to get even better under Coach Denbrock and with CJ Carr as the quarterback. So he's very encouraged from that standpoint. And then just going back to Julius Jones, I had an opportunity to talk to someone close to him, and just talking about the work that Mike Brown has done to establish a really great relationship, and how much they talk and how much they're in contact not only with Julius, but also his family as well. So it's kind of an onslaught, if you will. They're hitting Julius Jones Jr. from all sides, whether it's directly with the staff, family, former players that know the family. It's definitely an onslaught to get that young man to South Bend. So I think he's looking at, from what I hear, late spring, early summer. So like his official visits, he might actually take some official visits like April, May, or he's looking at, let me rephrase that. He'll be looking at the unofficials, even though they're not officials, as officials, as far as the gathering of information and how they're approaching it. His decision can either come late spring or early in the summer, because they choose to get it done by that standpoint. Quinn Burrell said to me that he looks to make a decision sometime in the spring. So those are their timetables for both of those big-time wide receivers. Running back, recent offer, Kadarius McMillan. Really haven't dug into his film yet, but, based upon Jawan Sider and his, the way he looks at the running back room and the way he evaluates, once we dig in, Trev, I'm sure we're going to find a very talented ball carrier. But the big name, of course, is Kamon Spell, right? The kid from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, 5-star running back, and the kid can do it all. He's a big back that can run, right? So when is the last time you heard that? Oh, Jeremiah Love, a big back that can run at Notre Dame. There was a time during his recruitment where people really thought Notre Dame had kind of like edged out in front right after he decommitted from Penn State. And then all of a sudden you start to hear a lot of noise about the Georgia Bulldogs after his visit down to Athens. And so right now I consider it to be a 3-team race with Notre Dame and Georgia probably being perceived as the 2 front runners. But it's going to be a fight to the finish. They're going to look to get him on campus during the spring and then an official visit. And, Jawan Sider, we saw him make tremendous moves in the same manner with Javian Osborne, where Notre Dame really was a dark horse in that race. And right after the unofficial visit, all of a sudden things swung in Notre Dame's favor. So as long as Notre Dame has a chance to get him on campus, I'm sure they feel good about being able to get him to land in that 27 class. Leighton Von Brandt, another decommitment from Penn State, the tackle. Big-time kid. Immediately after he decommitted, which I think was on a Friday, Notre Dame immediately reached out and set up a phone call with Coach Rudolph. And that phone call was like that next Monday. Of course, because Notre Dame was getting ready to play a game. That phone call was that next Monday. They got him to get on campus. He loves Notre Dame. Of course, there are a lot of players that are committed to Notre Dame that he's played against and he has a relationship with. So one could think, man, does that give Notre Dame an edge? Possibly so. But I think with his visit, how well it went, the respect he has for the staff, the respect he has for Coach Rudolph, and the legacy, he knows the development and the legacy of the offensive line development at Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame wants to be one of the top contenders to land Leighton Von Brandt. Now we get to the tight end position where, man, we saw Seneca Driver. We saw him at the Irish Invasion. Big time talent. But the one that I think is really starting to become one of those premier players. Once again, we go back to the Carolinas where Notre Dame is doing a great job for Jackson Dollar. And Trev, if you watch his film, you see explosiveness at the tight end position, which I think it seems like Coach Denbrock is kind of getting his feet settled when it comes to the evaluation of the tight end. And I think I said this last week. The tight end room at Notre Dame might be the most underrated room when they start practice in the spring. It might be the position on offense that nobody's really expecting anything from because the tight end room has been hit heavily by injuries, which has kind of affected the production and their usage the last 2 seasons. But they are really deep. And they're going to be young and talented and young and explosive at the position as well. So I think that's a room that you need to look out for, especially with the schedule not being as tedious or tough to start as it has been. You're going to maybe you see a lot of young players getting more action earlier that allows them to be impactful as the season goes on, especially as they matriculate or hopefully get into a playoff situation. So Jackson Dollar is a big time tight end. I think Notre Dame sits in great position with both of them. You know what? I think they would like both of them. I think they're going to end up taking 2, but I think they're still looking at some others as well, and they'll go through the unofficials. Jackson Dollar did tell me he's looking forward to getting to the campus during the spring. He's looking at that. And Seneca Driver is a kid he's already been multiple times. So he already has a great relationship. And so I think Notre Dame knows where they stand with him, but they're going to continue to work on both of these young men. I would love to get both of them. I'm greedy, Trev. I'm greedy. I'm greedy.
With talents like that, you got to be, man.
After you land Frizzell and Premer, I'm like, get two more. Get two more. Because we've learned you can never have too much depth in the tight end room.
Man.
Because that's just a position where it seems like every year Notre Dame loses one or two for whatever reason during the season. Actually, Washington and Eli Raridon were pretty healthy this year for the most part.
Yep.
Their top two guys. They really were. And yeah, they really didn't have any injuries. This was the first year in a long time that no one was really injured.
Yeah, it was Cooper Flanagan's injury last year that left a lot of questions for this season.
And Cooper kind of dealt with that lingering effect this year. But outside of Cooper, they were pretty much healthy.
I don't think it's a coincidence that now we're starting to see some momentum on the recruiting trail for the tight end position. Now that I think Mike Denbrock has a better understanding of what he wants the tight ends to be within that offense.
Absolutely.
Because I think he needed to see a little bit of like, okay, what does it mean with CJ Carr being a quarterback? Because when he came in, the tight end position was extremely diverse when he got to Notre Dame. You know, he takes over in 2024. So you think you got Mitchell Evans, who's more of that kind of traditional tight end. He lines up attached. Then you also have Cooper Flanagan, who, again, is another big-bodied, 6'6", 250-pound guy, does his best work attached. But then they also had guys like Eli Raridon, who you could flex out.
Yeah.
Who can do work from the slot. You have a guy like Jack Larson, who's not the physical build of what those other guys were. 6'3", 250. They're not really using him to block all that well. I think now that Mike Denbrock has a better understanding of what he wants the tight end position to be within this offense, you're starting to see a little bit more along the recruiting trail. Because what's some of the best stuff that Notre Dame's position coaches and their recruiting staff have done so far with Notre Dame commits is they sit down and show them, hey, this is going to be you in this offense. This is how we're going to use you in this system. Well, it's tough to do that sometimes when it's like, I don't know if they're going to use Preston Frizzell the same that they used Mitchell Evans. Not better, not worse. They're just different tight ends.
Yeah.
Completely different tight ends. So I don't think it's a mystery that you're starting to see some of that momentum carry over into that position. But the thing that my biggest takeaway from just kind of these top targets here is Notre Dame is still looking to go big game hunting, especially at the wide receiver position. After bringing in 5 guys in this last class, you know, bringing in Devin Fitzgerald and Caden Finley and Bubba Frazier and Dylan Faison and oh gosh, his name is escaping me. He's from Texas. Braden Robinson. Good Lord. After bringing in 5 guys, they're in a position now where they can kind of go big game hunting a little bit. I was talking with Brian before the show started, and we were both kind of like, hey, man, they're at the point where if they land both Quentin Burrell and Julius Jones Jr., you might be able to call that a day in the wide receiver room. Now, some of that will continue to pan out as we know a little bit more about the transfer portal and who leaves, who stays, because I think you're also going to see that impact the 2027 class, depending on who elects to come back and who's going to look for future opportunities elsewhere. Excuse me. So very interested to see what they do here. A lot of big game hunting from this offensive, really recruiting staff and the position coaches. Because at the end of the day, there's only one offensive commit right now in the 2027 class. And it's an offensive tackle. Talking about James Halter from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And Trev, that combination is literally an elite an elite boundary wide receiver and a field receiver. It's like literally you have your X and your Y.
Yep.
You have your guys.
And I appreciate that approach too, because it's also, I mean, Notre Dame has like 6 guys that can play slot receiver right now in their room currently. I mean, they really do. So I like that approach from Mike Brown as well. Sean, let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. And who are some top targets that we should be keeping an eye on and who Notre Dame is keeping an eye on right now?
It all starts with Braden Parks, right? He has great connection through family to Notre Dame, which has been talked about, but also the big-time 4-star who has upside to be a 5-star. He's really that talented. He was dominant. He was the state of Illinois Defensive Player of the Year, CCL, Catholic League Defensive Player of the Year. It's like everybody knew. And that's in the midst of, he plays with Brother Rice. Mark Carmel had the most dominant defensive line with Joey Quinn and Braden, and Jones. I was about to call him Braden Park. Braden Jones, who's committed to USC, and Bone Crusher, the big 350-pound defensive tackle in the 2028 class. Like, dude, they have everything, and he stood out amongst all of them. He was clearly the best defensive player, especially along the defensive line in the state of Illinois. So it starts with him. He has to be that guy that they go out and they get. The relationship is great. The relationship is great. Trev, I'm going to tell you this, man. He actually, along with another big time that offensive player that I'll put in mention when we mention guys at the end. At the Irish Invasion, he was part of the competition. They have the competition one-on-ones, right? And so it was tied. And so Braden Parks, they put an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman back to field punts as the tiebreaker. Basically, the one that drops the ball, that's the end of it. And so they both catch one, which is impressive for me, for 300-pound guys to have their backs turned to the jugs machine and to turn halfway through, not when they actually send the ball into the air. They waited until the ball was halfway there. They had to turn around, find it, and then go catch the punt as 300-pounders. So you saw the athleticism in this young man. And that's when I was like, oh, yeah, we have to get this kid. So if you need to know who he is, he's the must get along the defensive line, or one of the must gets along the defensive line for the Fighting Irish in the 2027 class. Carlos May is another kid out of Alabama that I appreciate the fact that Notre Dame got on this young man early before he started sizzling on the recruiting trail. Because right now, Trev, he's starting to sizzle. Everybody's paying attention now. The typical schools like Auburn was on him. Mississippi State was on him. Alabama really hadn't come calling. But now Ohio State, all the other schools, they're really starting to come around the young man. You talk about a great kid. He loves Notre Dame, loved his visit, has a really good relationship with Coach Washington. And it's just now Notre Dame has really set a good foundation with him. Now it's all about, can they close the deal as other big-time programs get him during contact period. When the contact period opens here soon in January, are they able to hold on? Are they able to keep their standing? Are they able to get him back on campus and stay right there? Because I really do think if they make him feel like he's a priority and they really want him, and he knows that for sure, they have a really great shot at landing this kid. Trev, I don't know if you've seen his film. This kid is like the three technique you want. The three technique that's constantly in the backfield, constantly making plays, and still can hold up at the point of attack. He's that kid. Absolutely love his film. Devin Robertson out of Mississippi, another kid who at the time where he got his offer shared with me and IB that Notre Dame was his dream school. There's a kid from Mississippi saying that. And Notre Dame has been trying to make hay and waves in the state of Mississippi, going back to Deuce McKnight, early with Womack, who ended up in Mississippi State. Sam Lejeune is from Mississippi, another kid that had camped at Notre Dame. That kid is like 295 and ran like a 4.7, Trev. He was clocked at 4.7 at Notre Dame, like 4.75 or something like that, right? This is the type of talent that Notre Dame has on their board, and they're going to have to filter it out and figure, and prioritize it. But Devin Robinson, once again, you watch his film, you're going to see him be able to play nose. You're going to see him be able to play three technique, Trev. He can do everything on that defensive line. It's between him and Lejeune, who's really one of the best players along the defensive line in the state of Mississippi. But this is a kid, once again, I think Notre Dame's in great position with this kid, to the point where I think that what was different about his recruitment to me, over the summer, it got to a point where his father made him stop taking calls from schools and coaches and they filtered everything through his dad so he could focus on getting better as a player and for his team. And that's exactly what he did. I thought that was very interesting. I had never seen that, but now, open period, Notre Dame will be able to reestablish contact. Of course, he visited for a game day, loved it. And so Notre Dame's in great position with all three of them. I'm greedy, Trev. The tight end and the D tackles are where I want everybody. I want everybody. If we could get all 6 of the guys that they're really interested in a defense tackle, I would take it. Because they all can play at Notre Dame. Every last player that they're targeting can flat out play at Notre Dame. Now, the other must get DJ Jacobs, edge rusher, 5-star. He's just one of those dudes, Trev. He's just a dude. He's the type of kid that you see that immediately comes in and he just finds a way to contribute. He's that talented. He's that talented. He's been on campus multiple times, always talks about how great of a visit he has, but he's a Georgia kid, Trev. He's a Georgia kid. You just have to wonder, does a talented Georgia kid along the defensive line, does he get out of the state of Georgia, right? Because that's the competition, right? But he's a different kid. The family input, what they want from him is going to be very important. Notre Dame is also recruiting his younger brother. That comes into it. And he's really good friends with Teddy Gerard, and that doesn't hurt it. That doesn't hurt at all. That doesn't hurt at all. Who will be coming in as he reclassified to the 2026 class. So Notre Dame is going to use everything they have at their disposal to get this young man, because I think to partner with the must get and Braden Parks on the interior, DJ Jacobs is that must get, in my opinion, on the other side. Now we go to another kid that his upside, his ceiling is off the charts. And that's Chris Whitehead. That's Chris Whitehead. Like, they love him. He loved his visit to Notre Dame. I'm still digging a little more on him, talking to his head coach, and just talking to his head coach, just finding out the type of young man that he is. And it's also going to be about the family. That's one thing that I did ascertain from a conversation with his coach. The family is going to be very much part of his decision. And Notre Dame is going to have to put in some work here, to get this young man. This is why the contact period, this right here is something that I said is a great benefit for Notre Dame. We don't like the fact they're in the playoffs, but for the 27 class, which makes the 26 class, ladies and gentlemen, Notre Dame put that 26 class together, and they were behind schedule from a recruiting standpoint. Their junior day was late, and probably wasn't as impactful as previous junior days. So for them to have to really hit turbo, Trev, going into those spring visits as they were preparing with spring practices, the work they did to catch up and set up those official visits and how impactful they were, man, you really have to tip your cap to the entire staff. The recruiting staff, analysts, Mike Martin, the coaching staff, everybody. The players that were already committed, the work they put in, everybody did an incredible job because the calendar was kind of shrunk on Notre Dame. Now Notre Dame really can be aggressive and get out there during the contact period, right? Why is the contact period so important? Well, let me give you a little story. There's a player in Notre Dame. He's out of Illinois. There's a player that Notre Dame waited at the front door of the school, waiting for the moment that the contact period opened. That impressed not only the mother of said recruit, it impressed the head coach, and it impressed the young man. That the moment the contact period was open, it wasn't a phone call, it wasn't a text. Literally, Notre Dame in person was standing there waiting for the doors to open to the school. Like, yeah. That type of stuff goes a long way during the contact period. And now, because they're not in the playoff, Notre Dame can do those little small important things for these 27 kids and target certain guys to make that type of impression. So think about that. Jalen Hill, defensive back. Look, this kid, first of all, what position does he play? Who's recruiting him, Trev?
Yeah, Mike Mickens.
So you don't have to ask me if he's good, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to get into that. But no, once again, his connection to Ace Austin, his connection to Josh Dobson, all of these guys know each other and they bonded even greater during the game day visits. So the community of that defensive back room is starting to extend even beyond the South Bend. Just talking. And it's reminiscent of like the conversations and the connections that Drake Bowen, Christian Gray, and all of those guys had, where they would play video games together and be online together and everything. Even Peyton Bowen was part of that, even though eventually he ended up at Oklahoma. So I think with Jalen Hill, the relationships, knowing he could be developed at Notre Dame and believing in Mike Mickens, that's going to go a long way with this young man. Yeah. But this is one of those where, they're in really good position. But, I mean, with all of these kids, I don't want to misspeak. With all of these kids, no kid is just a slam dunk. No kid that we talked about is just a slam dunk. It's going to be work for the staff, but they've done a great job putting themselves in great position with Jalen Hill as well. Marcus Fakatu is hey, man, I got to be careful when I say his last name. Man, let me slow. I heard myself say it, Trev. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, when I typed it out, I was like, I'm gonna have to enunciate this young man's last name because I was like,
absolutely. Let me slow down and take it syllable by syllable. But no, 2028 kid who's very high on Notre Dame and decided to reclassify to the 2027 class. And a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people were shocked that he reclassified. And matter of fact, let me give you I don't want to paraphrase it. I'll give you the exact quote. Because we talked about, are you sure? What made you so sure that this was the right decision? And he said, I played 2 years in the Trinity League now, and I played against 26 and 27 players already. And I already feel like I'm better than them or just as good as them. So it really does me no good to play another year. I was just ready to move up. So this is a confident kid that says, I've played against 26 kids and been better than them and outplayed them. I played against 27 kids and played on the same level or just as good as them. So I'm ready to, move up my timetable and make a decision. He's going to make a summer decision. And he's one of those kids that I expect Notre Dame to contact during the early contact period when it opens up, and then hopefully get him on campus for the spring. And once again, he's another kid that raved about his game day visit. Raved about it. Just said how wonderful, great of a time he had. He learned some things about Notre Dame that he didn't know outside of the tradition. And so I'll say it again. I just echo the game day visits were absolutely amazing by the Fighting Irish staff this year. They did an incredible job. So he'll be making his decision this summer. Did I miss anybody, Trev?
I'm going through the list. Did we talk about Josh Dobson, cornerback?
No. Let's save one of the best for last. The 5-star defensive back. Once again, the relationship he has with Jalen Hill, Ace Austin. We already spoke about that. But he's going to be making a decision pretty soon. And matter of fact, I talked to him not this past weekend, but I talked to him the weekend before. And he's basically down to 3 teams, in my opinion. In my opinion, I think it's 3 teams. But this is a kid that Notre Dame has been on for a long time. And if you put me in a pickle today and I was forced to say this is where he's going, I think he's going to end up in the Notre Dame class. I really think he's going to end up in the Notre Dame class. I would feel pretty confident saying that. I would feel pretty confident saying that.
It's definitely a good spot to be in. No doubt about that. Last one, Sean, is safety Gavin Williams. And I'm not sure if we touched on him yet, but
look, Gavin Williams, someone asked about honor. The other, man, that kid is super fast. 2 kids, had great visits, great relationship. It's going to be a battle. I think USC is very prominent in both of their recruitments. Getting Gavin to getting any kid to leave the coast is a task, but I'll give you the conversation we had. He missed 2 games, so it was just about making sure that he was healthy this year. And outside of that, Notre Dame has done an incredible job recruiting this kid. I'm sorry, man, I can't find it. I'll put it on the board. Check back this afternoon. I'll put it on the board. But once again, Gavin Williams, just incredible young man. And once again, what do you want me to say about his evaluation? I don't need to say anything. Mike Mickens is evaluating.
Yeah.
That's it. At this point, it's enough said. But it's all about Trev for me because of who they already have in the defensive backfield in the class. Like I was talking to Brian about a certain kid that just committed to another school. And I don't want to say his name. He's committed to another school, but Notre Dame could have had that kid if they had not gotten commitments previous to his commitment. That's where Notre Dame is in defensive back recruiting. Like, okay, we want that kid. We want that kid. We can have that kid. But, man, if we take him, then we have to say no to this kid. So that right there is where you're dealing with a wealth of riches, as we say, in recruiting, where you're really you're not saying no to high upside kids and 4-star kids that are possible 5-star kids once they develop. But it's like you just can't take them all. You just can't take them all. But Gavin Williams would definitely be one of those kids that they would want in the class without question. Without question. I just think from what I'm hearing, Mike Mickens has a chance to work his magic. I'll just leave it at that. Contact period in the spring, Mike Mickens has a chance to work his magic. So therefore, Notre Dame has just as good a chance as anybody else. They have just as good a chance as anybody else.
Well, I mean, that's good news, man. And then whenever you have a recruiter like Mike Mickens and a developer, a talent like Mike Mickens on your side, you're never really out of the game. Now, I think that's something that he has proven over the last couple seasons. That's absolutely for sure. Sean, let's kind of tie a bow on this segment and quickly talk about the 2027 quarterback situation. As we know, Teddy Gerard was one of the first commitments of the 2027 class, but he is now reclassified. And Brian talked last week about what all went into that decision and why that was what it was. And look, essentially the staff thinks that if CJ Carr has a season that he will most likely have, it's a good chance he's not going to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame in 2027.
Yeah.
So they want all hands on deck in this quarterback competition, which will likely feature Blake Hebert, Teddy Gerard, and Noah Grubbs. And so where does that leave the 2027 recruiting class then, Sean? What have you heard? Like, what are some of the things that you think Notre Dame is going to do from here on out? Do they go get another kid in the 27 class? What happens there?
So I'll say this. There is one name that I'll throw out there, and this is not anything that I've confirmed or I know for sure. I know there was previous interest, and so that's the reason why in previous conversations that I've had, so that's the reason why I'll say his name based upon the way Notre Dame has approached the quarterback situation. Remember, we were wondering why Notre Dame was taking so long to make their offers to their 27 quarterbacks when everybody was quarterbacks were starting to fall off the board, commit. And we're like, yo, what is Notre Dame doing? They offered Teddy Gerard. who was at the Irish Invasion. And then the second offer went to Peyton Houston, who they actually went to see work out. And so Peyton Houston is funny because we've seen the profile at the quarterback position kind of change, Trev, where they went to more taller quarterbacks, big strapping quarterbacks that had good arms. And Teddy Gerard was in that profile, but Peyton Houston wasn't in that profile. He was a shorter quarterback, more explosive, a little more athletic, could do more with his legs. Teddy Gerard is athletic as well, but just their style of game and their size profile was a little bit different. That was the two offers. Will they go get another quarterback? From a recruiting standpoint, just the optics of it, it's always good to be able to have your quarterback on visits when recruits come in, right? Teddy Gerard can't do that anymore if he reclassifies and he's part of the 26 class, right? But then what does that do for the numbers, right? So now you have a logjam. You have Blake Hebert, Noah Grubbs, Teddy Gerard, and then you have another 27 kid before you get to your 28 kid that you're going to start recruiting as well. So that's very interesting, Trev. That's very interesting how they're going to handle it. They can do it both ways. I mean, they can do it both ways, but I would like to say that they would go get a kid, and I would like to say that they go to get a kid that's different from what they have. This is the perfect opportunity to go get a kid that's not like Blake Hebert, that's not like CJ, that's not like Noah Grubbs, that's not like Teddy Gerard. If you want to go get a kid that it could fit into that dual threat more, that can be developmental, that you know would be good to sit and wait 2 to 3 years, and at worst, he's going to be a great backup for you. This is your perfect time to go get a kid like that.
Sure. I mean, I'm not as well versed in the recruiting world as what you are and what Brian is. This is just my opinion outside looking in. What I would go try to do is try to find like an Avery Davis type, a player that has the ability to help out your football team in another way. If, you know, let's say the quarterback room in 2027, that competition is what it is amongst those three guys that we talked about. Odds are one of the losers of that competition will transfer out. I'm not saying I hope that it happens. That's just day and age of college football now, especially when you're bringing in now two quarterbacks in the same class. I think it would behoove Notre Dame to be in a spot where you can bring in somebody that has the opportunity to play quarterback. But if the room stays loaded and you land a big 2028 recruit, the 2027 quarterback recruit, you call it more of an athlete, has the opportunity to help your team in other ways, like Avery Davis did. You know, I think about like Scrap Richardson. He played quarterback in high school. They brought him in. They made him a wide receiver. Maybe you don't do that right away with whoever you bring in the 2027 class, but I've always been a fan of quarterbacks kind of being one of the foundations of the class and help bringing it in. That's what Notre Dame has done the last couple seasons. CJ Carr was that for his class. Noah Grubbs was kind of that for his class. Somebody that was always present, always around, leader of the class. Because what some people don't know is like sometimes the evaluation of who you're going to be as a quarterback starts before you ever step foot on campus as a student. How do you bring in together that recruiting class? I think that's huge. I think that's absolutely huge. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's where I see it, Sean. I don't know if you see it differently, but that's just what I would do if I were them.
Yeah, I think that Avery Davis type, were you saying that? I wasn't thinking along those lines. I was thinking along the lines of a relationship. Once again, This goes back to that they've already done a deep dive on evaluation. They took their time. So I think they already know, like, these are the guys that we would want to go get because we've already looked at them. Would they revisit a Malachi Ziegler? You know, possibly. He was at the Irish Invasion. We watched him, you know, like what we saw. But there's a sneaky kid that came down quietly and worked out for Notre Dame that just won a state championship in Illinois. And right now he's blowing up, right? and his name is Israel Abrams. I watched him against Nebraska quarterback commit Trey Taylor out of the 27 class. That was, man, had a great chance, had great conversations with Notre Dame, and just decided to commit before Notre Dame was ready to make an offer. But just love Notre Dame. Absolutely love Notre Dame. Played ball 7-on-7 with CJ Carr, had a relationship with CJ Carr, camped at Notre Dame. But I watched him at Carmel take on Montini, Israel Abrams, and 52-50 was the final score, with Montini winning. And Montini came back from a 16-point deficit late in the third quarter. I'm talking about Israel Abrams just took over the game. He literally just, Trey Taylor was having one of the best games I ever saw him have. And all of a sudden, Israel Abrams just said, nah, I got this. And just play after play, big play after big play. He just put his team on his back. Right now, he's ranked as the number 3 quarterback in the 27 class, according to Rivals. Now, is that a type of kid? Once again, there's a relationship. He came down, he threw for Notre Dame, worked out for them. He's right here in Illinois. They know everything about him. Would he be willing to come in knowing that the quarterback room is to this point? He's also linked to Matt Campbell, Iowa State, who's now at Penn State. Does he get the opportunity to go there and compete early for a starting job? He's just a name just from relationship standpoint that I know Notre Dame liked, along with Malachi Ziegler, but they just only put 2 offers out because those are the 2 type guys from what they saw up close and personal. So, but I agree with you. The direction you laid out, I can definitely see that. But those are 2 names just because of relationship. Sure. And the staff already knowing who they are, and they can bring a little something different than what they already have in the quarterback room. That could be very interesting. Trev, man, hit me up. I watched his Israel Abrams Jr. film. It's absolutely insane. And Trev, his offer list is not really. It's like Iowa State, Northwestern, Purdue, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Michigan State, which Michigan State probably would be really hot on his heels with Pat Fitzgerald, who's a local guy here in Illinois and Chicago, going up there. And then outside of that, Indiana already got their 27 quarterback out of Illinois, who also camped at the Irish invasion. And we got the Jamison Purcell, the lefty we watched throw. He's the 27 quarterback in Indiana's class. So, and then Auburn, he does have an Alabama offer, but Notre Dame and Alabama are probably his biggest offers. You know, so I think he's, man, overlooked. And I think his junior film, when people get a chance to really look at his junior film in the offseason, I think you're going to see a lot more offers. He's definitely a Penn State offer is coming. As soon as Matt Campbell can get settled, a Penn State offer is coming.
For sure. No, that makes sense. But I took a look at his recruiting profile, 6'4", 187. Definitely that different kind of build. Yeah, I get that. I'll take a dive into his film and I'll hit you up after, let you know.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, we'll do. Folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to talk team and college football coming down the pike here on RTCF. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, in part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we are talking about the biggest concerns and the biggest reason for optimism. We're kind of taking a look at this offense, defense, and then within that, we're kind of breaking it down with some position groups. Now, last week we talked about some of the biggest questions. This is a little bit different of a conversation because some questions will just kind of naturally get answered. These are kind of the concerns heading into the offseason. And I think that some of them are pretty valid. Now, like I said, we don't want this all to be doom and gloom. So we are going to talk about reasons for optimism. And sometimes with the quarterback position, where we're going to start, sometimes it's twofold. Like the reason for optimism can almost be kind of like why you're concerned to a degree. And I'll explain what I mean here in a second. But now that the season's over and we're starting to get a better idea of who's going to stay, who's going to come back, who's going to leave, we kind of wanted to have just an overview discussion about some of the areas for concern. And like I said, we're going to start with the quarterback position here, Sean. We're going to start with some of the concerns. The concern is not with CJ Carr as a player. We got to see the type of talent that he was this year. And we know that there's room to grow. Now, this is a double-sided coin. We talked last week about how, hey, this is Notre Dame's first returning starting quarterback since 2020, when Ian Book returned from 19 to 20. But you and I were talking when we were game planning for this show, and it's been even longer since a second-year starter at Notre Dame didn't regress. That is something that I find to be somewhat troubling. Now, this is a different coaching staff. We don't know how Marcus Freeman is going to handle a returning quarterback. But what would you say is the last starting quarterback at Notre Dame that took another step in the positive direction in their second year as a starter? Jimmy Clausen?
Yo, we actually talked about this, and it was funny because I was like, I know who it would have been, but he didn't get a chance to do it because of a suspension. Like, it would have happened. It was almost like the coaching couldn't even mess that up. He was going to progress. But you're right. Clausen might be that person that we have to go all the way back to at the position for us to see it on the field. Yeah.
Like, that's something, because that ties into the conversation, Sean, of like, okay, how much do they put on CJ Carr's shoulders? And that's going to start to trickle down into some of the other concerns that we have at the other position groups on offense, and then some of the biggest reasons for optimism for this offense. But how much is Mike Denbrock willing to? How much is Marcus Freeman willing to put on the shoulders of CJ Carr? Is he at the stage where he can carry this team to a win? I think so. But sometimes that pressure kind of mounts up a little bit. Notre Dame in 2014 was at a spot where, like, the run game was decent, but they didn't have that, like, dude in the room overall in 2014. So it got to the point down the stretch of the season that Everett had to put the team on his back a little bit. And then, obviously, we know what happened in 2014. I'm not putting that on Everett Golson. I think he was used a little bit as a scapegoat. But it's been quite some time in South Bend since we've seen a good natural progression at the starting quarterback position. And under Marcus Freeman, it's just been an incomplete. I think we would have seen some improvement from Tyler Buckner from 22 to 23 if he didn't get hurt. But we'll never know. It's an unknown. Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard played their final years of eligibility in South Bend, so we don't know what that offense would have looked like with them as a returning starter. So now we have the opportunity to do this. But the biggest area of concern, and I don't have an answer for you folks. Sean Davis doesn't. I know Brian doesn't. Like, this is just something that we're all going to have to find out together. But it is a big area of concern of, like, will CJ take another step in development? All signs are pointing in the direction of yes. But I couldn't have seen Deshaun Kaiser taking a step back from 15 to 16. But I didn't see that. After Ian Book's 2018 season, coming in as a redshirt freshman and playing the way that he did, I thought he was going to light the world on fire in 2019. Big picture, statistically, he did. But how do we always measure quarterbacks, Sean? It's what you do in the biggest moments. How do you perform in the biggest games? I would argue that Ian Book kind of padded his stats a little bit against the lesser opponents that were on that schedule in 2019, because his performance against some of the better teams on the schedule looked a little bit different than what he did against, like, New Mexico or Bowling Green. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at with the quarterback position, Sean. It's definitely a concern going forward of what type of direction will CJ Carr go in.
It's interesting that you say that, because we had the discussion, and it really links to everything else, because we were talking about the luxury and whether or not people understand how luxurious of a situation CJ Carr walked into. This is not a debate about how good CJ Carr is or is going to be. It's about the situation that he walked into. Like, other than Julian saying, I don't know anybody that walked into a better offensive situation with what was around them than CJ Carr. That's just honest assessment. Your starting running backs were first and second team All-Americans. That's to be able to lean on a running game like that. That doesn't happen a lot, right? Julian Sayin, conversely, leaned on maybe the top 2 receivers in all of college football. Like, it's crazy that they both had great surroundings, but it was really the inverse. So when you talk about how much CJ is going to have on his shoulders, not having that, and that's not to say that the Notre Dame running game can't be. From a production standpoint, this is how crazy it is. The Notre Dame run game next year, we might be sitting here next year at the same time saying, man, they put up better numbers as a running back room this year. Because maybe the offensive line is more dominant. Maybe they don't have the explosive plays, but maybe they are like the numbers are right there, average yards per run. Maybe they have more touchdowns because guess what? They're better in the red zone because the offensive line play is better. The tight end play is better. Now the 12 and 13 personnel comes back into play. Now Mike Denbrock, because he has depth and more talent in the tight end room, can really get to some things in his bag. There's so many reasons why the numbers can actually be better moving forward, but it won't be as surprising and like spectacular, shall I say, as having the backfield that you had in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So he's going to have to get better, but that means this wide receiver room has to take a step, because it's not just about CJ Carr getting better and having more on his shoulders. All right, we don't have that. We don't have a player necessarily right now until we see it that you can hand the ball off backed up on the 2-yard line or the 5-yard line, and they could take it 98 or 94. We don't have that. We don't have a guy that can break free and look at his sideline and have a conversation as everybody's chasing him and nobody's gaining any ground. I don't know if we have that in the running back room, right? But maybe we can get that in the passing game now. Maybe we have some guys that you can get a screen to and they can pop it and take it 50 or 60. Maybe you have someone that can hit, come across on a dig. You get it to him, he takes it up the field, because Lord knows we saw it happen against us week 2 when we faced Texas A&M. Mario Craver did it multiple times. So, hey, why can't we get somebody that can do it? Hopefully, we can get that type of production out of the wide receiver room to kind of assist CJ and let's not have him have so much on his shoulders.
Absolutely.
He can continue to use the pieces around him, even if they might not be as spectacular as what he had as a redshirt freshman. So that is a concern for me. Like you said, like, how much are we going to put on CJ? That goes to Gino, that goes to Coach Denbrock, and what they're able to develop as an offense. And you pointed it out earlier, Trev, like Denbrock from a recruiting standpoint and also a play calling standpoint might be getting to a point where now I really know what I can do, what I have in this tight end room, the multiplicity of the talents in this room and how I can use them formationally. I mean, I don't know if you saw the game Saturday night, right? The Bears-Packers game.
Mm-hmm.
The play that ended the game, that was 13 personnel, bro. It was a big play, but it was 13 personnel. They ran 13 personnel 9 times all night. The previous 8 times, it was a run. You talk about setting up a play for the right time and using your personnel not only to attack with the run, but to get the safeties to come down and hit them with big plays over the top. Like when your tight ends are multiple like that, you can affect defenses and safeties like that in the linebacker. So I'm looking forward to Mike Denbrock being able to get into his bag and to really if you are putting more on CJ Carr's shoulder, now it's about to get fun.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. And look, guys, we're not talking about whether he takes a step backwards from a talent perspective. Like, that's my concern is with how the coaching staff manages him, because we just haven't seen it. I understand. I've seen it in the chat. It's the Freeman era. It's CJ Carr. And I agree. I agree with that sentiment. But the fact of the matter is we just haven't seen Marcus Freeman develop a starting quarterback going into his second year as a starter, just simply because they haven't had it. You guys know me at this point. I'm a show me person. Am I confident that it'll happen? Yeah, but there's also a concern on the flip side of that coin. But Sean, you bring up a lot of good points about some of the supporting cast around CJ Carr, and that's kind of what takes us to the running back room. Because of the talent that was just in the room with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I'm sure that you and I and everybody else in the chat can agree that the expectation for Aeneas Williams or Keedron Young or Nolan James or the two incoming freshmen is not, okay, guys, who's going to be the next Jeremiah Love? Because no team has a returning Jeremiah Love next season in college football. Not a one at the running back position. So I think that's what's interesting. So the biggest concern that we talked about is, do you have a guy or maybe a handful of guys that can take over a room? Because I'm with you. I think from a production standpoint, I think the running back room's output as a room is going to look very similar to what it did this year. 29 total touchdowns. But with that being said, I don't think it's one player is going to have 18 and the other player is going to have 11. I think it's going to be much more distributed amongst the room. I said that about the wide receiver room coming into this year. We got a lot of questions last offseason. It was like, can Greathouse and Fields go for 1,000? And then Rare didn't get this. It's like, hey, I think it's going to look a little bit more like, hey, the leading receiver is going to have like 700-800 yards. Then you're going to have like 2 to 3 guys at like 500 to 600. Like that's kind of where I see the running back room being a little bit. Like, think about this. The years that Georgia was going on their national championship runs, they never had an 1,000-yard back. But their run game was still effective.
I did not know that, Trev. That's very interesting. Now that I think back, you're right.
In 21 and 22, Georgia didn't have an 1,000-yard running back.
I don't think they have one this year. Do they? I don't think they do.
Let me look. But I don't think so. But you can get it done a bunch of different ways, right? I mean, Georgia's leading rusher this year was Nate Frazier. He had 861 yards. And Chauncey Bowens behind him had 516. But point being, in the years that they won the national title in 2021, Zamir White had 856. James Cook had 728. Kenny McIntosh had 328. Kendall Milton had 264. And then Stetson Bennett, their quarterback, had 259.
And James Cook is pretty darn good.
Yeah, he's not bad. Yeah, he's not bad. But it's the same thing in 2022. Kenny McIntosh had 829. Dewan Edwards had 769. Kendall Milton had 592. Branson Robinson had 330. So I think you're going to see a much more by committee this upcoming season in the running back room. But what we've seen this year, and really you could argue for the duration of Marcus Freeman's tenure, this ties back into the fact that they do have a returning starting quarterback. Will the pass game be able to carry the day? Because I don't know if you have a running back or a pair of running backs in that room that can take over a game the way that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price did. And that's not me definitively saying that they don't. We just don't know. Could Aeneas Williams? Sure. Because we're also talking about a running back that touched the ball like 11 times this year and 5 of them went for touchdowns. So it's like they could. I'm not blind to that fact. I wish Keedron Young would have stayed healthy so we could have seen what he was going to do this year in games. So is the guy probably in the room? Yeah, I think so. Between the 5, the 3 returners, and then the 2 incoming freshmen, excuse me. Do I think that there's somebody that could potentially take over games? Yeah, but is it going to be next year? Is it going to be in 2027? What does that look like? I think that's the biggest concern for Notre Dame's running back room going into 2026. Is do they have a guy or a set of guys that can take over games the way, or is that going to cause Mike Denbrock to have a shift in philosophy, cause Marcus Freeman to have a shift in philosophy and say, hey, this season the quarterback might have to be the player that takes over games. We might have to have one of the outside skilled players, a wide receiver, a tight end, somebody like that take over games. But I think that's a very interesting area of concern for the running back room because look, the foundation that we're working on here, folks, is not none of the questions that we have today are about talent. It's, are they going to be good enough? That's not it. That is not a question for any of the position groups that we talk about today. It's just what level of performance. It's one thing that we want to keep an eye on, that's for sure. But that's where I'm at with the running back room, Sean.
Concern I pointed out when we were talking about a Trev, health. Yeah. Do we talk about the talent, the explosiveness? You knew every week Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price were going to show up. They're going to show up. They're going to be there to take the ball. Keydron Young has been injured. Aeneas Williams has been injured. Like those, you assume or presume that those are the top two guys right now going into the spring. Your top two guys have had injuries.
Yeah.
So are they going to be able to show up week after week? That's going to be a concern for me. Because if one of them goes down and everything stays the way it is with Jabron Payne jumping in the portal, now you're dependent on youngsters. As much talent as they have, you're dependent on youngsters, right? And I think Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price will both say, we probably wanted to play, but we're really happy we got a chance to sit behind Aldrick and watch him do what he does. Has nothing to do with whether or not they're better or more talented. It just means something to be able to sit and watch others do it at a high level, to really show you how to prepare, to show you how to lead, to show you how to be having a professional approach, even though you're not a pro. Like, this is how we do it in the running back room at Notre Dame. This is the standard. And for them to be able to sit and watch and not have the pressure of having to carry a load when they were young and just be used sparingly to get their feet wet, that's something you want Javian Osborne to have. You want him to have that, you know? So I just worry about the health and the depth. The health and the depth. Not from, once again, not from a talent standpoint, but just from the standpoint of situationally. Do you really want to have your youngsters? I mean, you have no choice if guys are injured. That's why you go out and recruit. But all things being perfect, you don't want them to have to carry a load. You want them to be able to be eased in, learn the offense, and then be better by the time it comes playoff time. Yeah. That if they do have to give you a little bit more, they can do that. So that's something that I think about with the running back room because of what we've had. Not even the talent of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, just the fact that for the most part, they were healthy and able to go. You didn't have to worry about that.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree completely. And health is something that is going to be evaluated throughout the rest of the offseason. Can people stay healthy? What does Keydron Young's journey back look like? Will he be ready to go come, summer, fall camp? All things that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Sean, the next three positions that we're going to talk about, I grouped together like in our outline. I grouped together because it's the same conversation, big picture, but it looks a little different when you break down wide receivers, tight ends, and offensive line. Big picture, the concerns for all three of those is who plays and what's the rotation. For the offensive line is not rotation, it's just who plays where. Now, the concerns in that are a little bit different. So for wide receivers, we'll start there. Who plays and what's the rotation? We were told that there's going to be a 6-man wide receiver rotation this year. And then by midway point through the season, Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison were on track to play more snaps than what Bo Collins did in a 16-game season. They were going to surpass that by the end of the regular season. That's an area of concern. We've talked a lot about wide receiver development. Sean, you and I talked about this before. I think we talked about it off air. Brian and I have talked about this before on shows. There are 14 scholarship wide receivers in the room right now. 11 of them have sophomore eligibility or younger. At some point, you have to start developing that young talent that's in the room. Get Cam Williams ready to go. Get Micah Gilbert ready to go. Logan Saldate, Elijah Burris, Scrap Richardson, all those guys. And then you have, obviously, the 5 incoming true freshmen. So what's the rotation look like? The transfer portal is going to play a factor in some of these position groups. I think that's fair. Like, I know Notre Dame is targeting a wide receiver in the portal. What does that look like? Where does he fit? How many do they bring in? But Sean, the biggest concern is you have a room that is absolutely loaded with upside. How you feel about the tight end room is how I feel about the wide receiver room. You can get a 6-man rotation with just the guys you have in the room. And it would be a darn good wide receiver rotation too. Like imagine this. If Notre Dame goes into a season where their starting wide receivers are Jaden Greathouse in the slot, Faison at the field, and you start Micah Gilbert in the boundary. And then they rotate in Cam Williams in the boundary. They can rotate in Logan Saldate in the slot and KK Smith to the field. That's a good six-man receiver rotation. And I still didn't even mention Caden Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, Bubba Frazier, any of those guys. So very interested to see what Mike Brown does in the offseason with this wide receiver room, because the biggest area of concern is, are they going to go back to the transfer portal and bring in 2 to 3 guys? And then you're just hoping that all of this young talent is going to stick around for their redshirt junior or redshirt senior year to start contributing. That's my biggest concern with the wide receiver room this offseason, Sean.
It's simple for me when it comes to the wide receiver room. I already briefly talked about the tight end room and how I really think they have a lot of promise. This wide receiver room, Trev, when's the last number 1 receiver recruited and developed through Notre Dame?
The last true number one that they had that was recruited and developed by Notre Dame?
Yep. Are we talking Claypool?
I mean, it's either Claypool or Kevin Austin in 21.
Did you consider Kevin Austin a true number 1? I know he was the number 1.
But I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Probably, it's probably Claypool.
Claypool?
Yeah, 19. Maybe Javon McKinley in 2020, but injuries kind of hurt him.
It's time, Trev. The same way we thought about the quarterback room 2-3 years ago. Like, it's time for Notre Dame to evaluate, recruit, sign, and develop a quarterback from within. They had 2 guys in the quarterback room that they did that. Matter of fact, 3 starting in the spring. And we saw the one that lost out and had to transfer go and really settle in quite well at his destination in Syracuse. I'm talking about Steve Angeli. That's a big feather in the cap, right? And we didn't talk about it, Trev. We could have. Who's going to be the backup? Because we talked about CJ in the quarterback room. Who's the backup? Because you had a situation now where you felt like if something happened to CJ in the game, nobody panicked. No one was going to be panicked about the quarterback play. Now we don't know. We're hopeful that guy's Blake Hebert. We're hopeful that they knew it's their jobs as coaches to not only deal with the present, but to forecast what is to come.
Absolutely.
If you watched episode 2 of Wake Up to Echoes, Marcus Freeman knew he had lost Kenny Minchie when he told him in his office. He knew that. Everybody knew that. So I'm having a conversation with Gino immediately. Like, hey, we got to get him ready to go for next year. Whomever that is. Maybe he was pointing to Blake Hebert. Maybe he was pointing to some film of Noah Grubbs. Whomever. We have to get that kid ready to go next year. You have to forecast that far ahead. And so that's a concern. But then moving to the wide receivers, the wide receiver room has that same question that the quarterback room had. Now, somebody has to come out of that room that you evaluated, you recruited, you signed, and developed. It has to happen. When is it going to happen? Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? Many of us thought it might be Jaden Greathouse last year in the preseason. And like you said, for some reason, even before he got injured, the snaps, like, what happened? So, and especially with the lack of tight ends with playing experience, which limits your 12 and 13 personnel, you really thought you would see a lot of 3 and 4 wide formations. And it seemed like it was the same guys. So, man, the bullseye, I think, is on that wide receiver room, Trev.
I said it last week. The wide receiver room that's the one that I'll be watching under a magnifying glass this offseason.
Absolutely. It's moved from the quarterback room last offseason with Geno, with the two young guys and Steve Angeli. It's moved over to Mike Brown offensively. And now like, okay, we need some guys coming out of that room that are going to be impactful.
Absolutely. Well, and we can have the same conversation around tight ends. And this one, we talked a lot about it when we dove into tight end recruiting. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but the concern is at the top end. Who emerges as that tight end one? This is something that I'm not overly concerned with because Notre Dame has had a track record year over year where their, eventual number one tight end was more of a rotational guy or didn't do a whole lot the year before. I mean, Eli Raridan caught 11 passes in 2024 and then stepped up to be Notre Dame's number one tight end. And I know it's unfortunate he didn't get into the end zone, but his impact was definitely felt. I think there was a couple shows ago, but I think Irish Gordian Knott put a point in the chat where it was like, is Eli Raridan one of the most impactful pass catchers at Notre Dame to have not scored a touchdown? Because his impact was felt all season long. I mean, I think back to what he did in the first two games, what he did against NC State, never got into the end zone. But the concern is, who is that? Is it Cooper Flanagan coming off of an Achilles injury? I don't know. We talked earlier about some of the benefits, as much as we hate to have this conversation, around not playing in the playoffs. Like, what would it have looked like if Cooper Flanagan kind of felt not forced to come back, but tried to give it a go a little bit quicker than what he was ready for? And he starts playing in the playoffs. What does that look like? I don't know. But the concern at tight end, again, is not about talent. That room is absolutely loaded. It's just who steps up to be that number one. Who's going to be ready to go? Who plays? Is it Cooper Flanagan? Is it Ty Washington? Is it Jack Larson? Is it Ian Premer? Is it Preston Frizzell? We don't know. What's the health of that room looking like? Because there's been significant injuries in the tight end room for years. That's my biggest concern with the tight end room, Sean. And I know we talked a lot about that. So we could break down the offensive line because this is probably the second biggest room behind wide receivers. That is my focal point for the offseason. Now, biggest area of concern here is who plays where. Like the talent's there. That's the benefit. If there's one room that I'm confident that I don't think that the team is going to have to go to the transfer portal for, it's the offensive line. Like 22 scholarship offensive linemen. The talent's there. You have proven experience. You have veteran leadership going into next season, depending on who comes or who stays. But who plays where? I think that's a concern. And does Joe Rudolph get that combination right? Because if he does, this could be a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. If he doesn't, I think it's going to look like this year. Pretty good at times and kind of at other points. But that's my concern with the offensive line.
And I will support that with my bullet point of we need to see this team be nasty. Especially with the departure of the two running backs. This offensive line needs to get nasty. Week to week, they need to set the tone and reset the line of scrimmage 3 to 4 yards down the field. They need to be nasty. I don't see the nastiness. I just don't see the nastiness. Right? Maybe you got some from Ashton Craig, but the only nasty guy on the offensive line, really, veteran-wise, was Billy Schrauff. Because if you're going to tell me that after him was Gerby Lambert, that's an indictment, in my opinion. If your youngster was the one bringing nastiness, especially when you had nastiness that left the room and went to Nebraska and Indiana, and now you see how nasty Indiana's offensive line is, that is something that I think is sorely missing. Attitude. Not talent, like you said, Trev. Not talent. And like you said, where are you placing the talent? Put them in position to be at their best. But more than that, we need an attitude along the offensive line. There needs to be an attitude adjustment, man. There needs to be an attitude adjustment. And it's not about pregame speeches. It's not about what you say on the field before you go into the locker room. All of that, that's cute. What do you do when you strap it on? When you strap the helmet on? What do you do? What do you do? I saw somebody look. The first part for Charles Jagusah is making it to the first game. Make it to the first game. Because we talked about the upside, the talent. We know all that. No more discussion. Do whatever you have to do to make it to the first game. So whatever you have can be on display. I think he can be nasty. I think he has that type of attitude. Billy Schrauth can be nasty. He has that type of attitude. Ashton Craig, once again, just can't stay healthy. Just can't make it through a full season. Right? Your tackles this year weren't nasty. They were kind of finesse. And when things got tight, when you needed a drive, first game, to either tie or win the game, your tackles failed you. Because you can't be finessed against those two ends. You can't. And that you have to build the offensive line with that mindset. If we're going in a championship game going against those type of ends, needing a drive, we have to be this at the tackle position.
Absolutely.
We have to be this at the tackle position. And you have to have an honest assessment about what's in your room and the guys that can give you that. Not the guys that are pretty and technically sound and do it. No. We need some attitude on the offensive line. Some flat out attitude, right? Because the same two defensive ends. What did Elko say after the game, Trev? We got whipped. We got whipped in the offensive line. We got whipped. And they were supposed to have one of the best offensive lines in all of the SEC, saying they got whipped by an ACC defensive line. Go figure.
Well, yeah, agreed. I mean, you brought up a really good point about the run game, Sean, that I wanted to touch on. And this does compound with the fact that you don't have a Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Some of Jeremiah Love's best highlights from this season was him just making an incredible play after making people miss where, Sean? In the backfield. I don't know. Look, I have all the faith in the world in Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Nolan James, Javian Osborne, and Jonas Walton. I don't know if any of them in that room are getting tackled 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, rolling off the chest of another defender, getting up, and then running 48 yards for a touchdown. Jeremiah Love was a special talent. And that running back room production isn't going to take a dip, and I would argue could be even better as, an entire unit next season if the offensive line does what you're talking about. But that's a big if. We've seen it in spurts. You could argue we haven't seen it against some of the better talent, but we have seen this offensive line do it in spurts. Consistency and the moments in the big game is how this offensive line has to be evaluated. Respectfully, I don't care that you move Stanford's defensive line off the ball. I need to see it against Miami. I need to see it against Texas A&M. I need to see it for a full game against Penn State in the Orange Bowl. You shouldn't have to have a really bad first half to then finally let that trigger you and say, okay, we should probably start playing better. Now, I know there were some other things involved in that. It's personnel changes. Charles Jagusah comes in and he plays right guard. But the level of consistency in which they play to that level has to get better. And if it does, then I think that Aeneas and Kedron and all of those guys are going to have very productive seasons. But it's just going to look a little different. I said this before. I said this in 24. I said this past season. I still think Jadarian Price was the best lateral cutter on that team. I don't know if you're going to have that type of wiggle with this running back room to the degree of Jadarian Price. Same thing I said about Jeremiah Love, I'll say about him. Some of his best runs this season were making people miss where? Behind or at the line of scrimmage. The offensive line has to generate a better push. And that's top down. Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, Joe Rudolph are going to have to get together and say, let's not just put the best five on the field. Let's put the best five on the field in their best spots. Because there's a world that Knapp, Will Black, Billy Schrauth, Kirby Lambert, and Charles Jagusah all start. But if you put Will Black at guard, I don't think the offensive line has as big of a ceiling compared to if he was at tackle. So that's going to be a huge question moving forward for this offensive line. Absolutely. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball here real quick, Sean, before we get into reasons for optimism, because there are also a lot of reasons for optimism for this offense. Don't get it twisted. Top concerns for defense, and I'll start with the defensive line. Mine is solely surrounding the interior of the defensive line. I put out an article last week, and I said that Notre Dame's defensive line was one of the most underrated units in the country. And part of the reasons why they flew under the radar so much is because they didn't have that All-American name attached to it. They didn't have, the David Bailey, the Akeem Mesidor, the Ruben Bain, the Colin Simmons, like big name attached to it. But this was a very, very productive defensive line. Finished the season, regular season, with 285 total pressures. 285. Last season, Sean, they finished in a 16-game season with like 272 total pressures. So you had a more productive defensive line in 4 less games. 4 less games. The biggest question is, what does the interior of the defensive line look like? Because you're losing a lot of veteran leadership here. Gabe Rubio's exhausted his eligibility. Jared Dawson exhausted his eligibility. I know Jason Onye is appealing for a 6th year, but we don't know when we're going to hear back from that decision. So we're working off of the premise that Jason Onye is not going to be back. If he is, kind of solves a good amount of your issues along the interior, especially with how he finished the season and the level of play that he was at. But now you're looking at a room where it's like, okay, you got Donnie Heinisch, who's a very good player, Elijah Hughes, who contributed, and then a bunch of players that we've been talking about for the last couple seasons where the entire conversation was, is this the year they break out? I'm about to go on my 3rd year straight talking about Armel Mukam. Know what I mean?
He's your Jason Onye, bro.
He is, man. He is, bro. And now it's to the point, it's like, okay, this offseason, again, I'm going to talk about Armel Mukam, and we're going to hear about all these reports about Armel Mukam. Will Al Washington be able to get him ready? What happens with Davian Dixon? What happens there?
You know what, Trev? We talk about that, but I ask this question. Isn't that how it went at Alabama in their heyday? That you really wouldn't hear about their interior defensive linemen until their 3rd year? They had to wait. And their junior year was their breakout year, or their redshirt junior year was their breakout year. Just to kind of give perspective, like maybe that's the way it really, maybe at that position.
Sure.
I don't, because certain positions, it's just really hard to come in and make an immediate impact.
Sure.
And maybe interior defensive line is just one of those positions. But I just wanted to say that because you were headed down that road.
Well, and that's totally fair. Absolutely fair. But the point still is, Sean, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this too, is the Notre Dame defensive tackle rotation is at a spot now where it's like, this is a position group that will likely have to dip into the portal to get some level of depth, some level of veteran leadership. But who steps up? The concern there is, will they be able to maintain that level of play, losing potentially 3 veterans, 2 for sure, and guys like Rubio, Onye, and Dawson? I think that's a concern going into this season.
That's fair. That's very fair. I think that what you pointed out, but then also not having a guy. Just not having a guy, right? I had this discussion with someone, just to use them. It's not apples to apples, but man, you lose Mesidor and Bain. What do we do with the guys we have? Yeah, we can go out and get somebody from the portal, but are they going to come in and do what these guys have done developing in the program? But you know what they do have? They're like, well, next year it might be Justin Scott and our interior guys that have played and that are young, and now they're ready to be those guys, right? So maybe the edge guys are ready, and we'll get to that into optimism. Maybe it'll be that for Notre Dame. Maybe the interior might not be as, because let me tell you something, Jared Dawson was at, they got every bit of investment from Jared Dawson in the transfer portal, right? Every bit. And if they can repeat that with whomever they go out and get in the portal, then you say to yourself, okay, Jared Dawson was really good. He was really good this year.
He was.
But I understand the concerns because it's really an unknown. It's
And
really an
that's
unknown.
yeah.
Really,
and same premise with the offensive side, with the offensive discussion.
yeah.
I'm not questioning the talent. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like it's that provenness on the field. Because Notre Dame in back-to-back seasons had very veteran players playing in the defensive tackle rotation.
Mhm.
Riley Mills, Howard Cross, and back-to-back seasons in 23 and 24. This year you had Onye, Rubio, and Dawson, three very experienced veteran players. And now you're talking about somebody who I mean, Donovan Heinisch is now their most experienced returning defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And he's just a different type of player than what some of those other guys were. So interesting to see the development there. Al Washington, I know, is confident in this group. We'll just see where that takes him. Because now you are.
No, that's not the downplay. I want to make sure everyone do. This is not a downplay of Donovan Heinisch at all. For so many reasons, he's valuable to the defense and to that room for a myriad of reasons, you know. But like you said, he's just a smaller guy, you know, that has to play a certain way, you know, to be impactful. And those are facts. Those are just facts.
Well, the other piece of it too, Sean, is like we've seen, the trenches for Notre Dame are not immune to injuries.
That's another fact.
What happens if Donnie Heinisch gets hurt? Then you're really relying on some inexperienced guys. Now, fact of the matter is they're going to have to be. Like, you can't go back in time and then just play Armel Muka more snaps than what he actually played. You can't make Davian Dixon, like, not get hurt, you know?
Yeah.
But the concern is what level of development do we see from this group? Because they have a tall task. Now, we're going to talk about the defensive ends here in a couple minutes because it's a completely different story with that group. But the interior of the defensive line is going to be very interesting. Sean, I know we're kind of touching every single position group here. I'd be curious to see if you have another one for linebackers. My only concern here is just what is the timetable for Kingston's return? I'm not concerned about the depth. I'm not concerned about the talent because even without Kingston, you still have Drake, you still have Jaden Ausberry. Potentially, you still have Jalen Sneed. And Madden Faramo started to take on a heavier workload as the season went on. So that's 4 guys right there. Let's say Jalen Sneed decides to move on from South Bend and go a different way in his career. That's still a 3 linebacker rotation that I have extreme confidence in. But my only concern with the linebacker room is the fact that we just don't know Kingston's timetable of return. What is his workload going to be? And that's really even more of a question than a concern. But I don't know, Sean, do you see it differently?
You only say that because of the dynamic that you know he brings to the table, right? The depth that you spoke about. I don't want to get too deep into it because that goes over into the optimistic side of it that we'll talk about. But no, it's a major concern. When is he going to be available? But once again, this isn't your your typical early season tough schedule, right? So if he's coming back middle of the season or literally just a year to the date of when he was injured, and that's the middle of the season, you're fine with that, especially if he's coming back as himself and impactful. I think we're finding that Notre Dame will be just fine at that position. I think they'll just be fine. I'm very interested in, I think Max Bullock did an incredible job. So some people might think his departure is somewhat of a concern. Maybe the 2 linebacker commits they have in the 27 class, maybe they listen to others and listen to overtures. But I don't think they will because, look, your head coach, that's his baby. That room is his baby. So I don't think that's a concern as far as the linebacker room is concerned. But
agreed.
Yeah. Not too much to be concerned about. Yeah.
And we'll get into it for reasons for optimism, but agreed completely. Final concern on the defensive side, and I just tied in the entire secondary together and just talk about defensive backs. Will the depth be ready to go? I think we can all agree that at the top, this is probably going to be the best secondary in college football coming back next year once you combine everything. We'll get more into that here soon. But it's the depth pieces. It's like, okay, you're very confident in Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. They got a lot of meaningful minutes. But fact of the matter is Mark Zachary can't play 3 positions at once. God forbid you have a bunch of different injuries, which we've seen before. Leonard Moore missed some time this year. Christian Gray missed some time this year. Devontae Smith missed some time this year. Adon Schuler missed like 2.5 quarters because he had to sit out due to a targeting call. Mark Zachary's only one guy. So who else kind of joins him now? Does Cree Thomas take on a bigger role? What role do the incoming freshmen play? In Kari Adams and Aiden Pouncey? Odds are one of the two, if not both of those true freshmen, are going to play at some point because, Sean, that's just what we've seen the last 3 years. Ben Morrison played as a true freshman. Christian Gray played as a true freshman. Leonard Moore took over as a true freshman. So we've seen it. And then the same thing with the safety rotation. At the top, it's spectacular. Who else steps up? Is it Joey O'Brien? Does Ethan Long take another step in his career? All good problems to have, but the concern is if you do have an unfortunate injury, what does the depth start to look like? So I think that's really interesting for the defensive backs, Sean.
You trust in the coaching and the development, and you also trust in the fact that there is now a plan. I think there was a lot lost in translation with the departure of Al Golden and Chris Ash coming in, not only from the standpoint of system, but just from the standpoint of the assistant coaches knowing, like, okay, how do I need to teach? Like, what exactly do I need to teach? And once again, I don't think it was so much of a schematic turnaround that we saw, because there was definitely a schematic turnaround. I think there was more than Trev. That was an attitude turnaround. Okay, we're going to be aggressive rather than being passive. That's attitude. And once everybody knew, okay, we're going to be who we've been. We're going to be aggressive. Now, let's add on the schematics to that attitude. And whatever you give them, it can be done aggressively. And so I think now that that's been set, there's going to be a smooth transition and a foundation that now you can build upon and add the other things that you might want to get to in the defense, particularly with the zone and, showing certain coverages pre-snap and getting the other things, which I don't think anybody has a problem with that. That's very beneficial, especially when you're going up against good quarterback play. It's very beneficial. But yeah, the depth concern, and like you said, who's going to be that guy, right? Once again, the luxuries that we've been able to watch that we might not even realize, like, dude, we had Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray, and Benjamin Morrison got hurt and was done, and Leonard Moore came in. Like, dude, what school has that? What school has that? And you don't realize how much of a luxury that was, that none of us knew it was a luxury at the time. That's just what it ended up being. But it's like, you've had that. And so now we beg the question, if Leonard or Christian go down, who's that third guy? Who's because Leonard Moore came in for Christian Gray before Benjamin Morrison got hurt, when Christian Gray was out, and then he came in for Benjamin Morrison when he was out for the season. Like, guys are, getting guys like that, is there one on the squad?
Oh, sure. Well, and then the other position too is nickel. I'm sure Dallas Golden is the present and the future at the nickel position. What if he gets hurt?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things encompassing make it really interesting. Do you go with
and
one
I'll
of the
say
younger
this.
players?
I'll say this. I know what we saw might not be something that was pleasing to our eyes, but you don't give up on Carson Hobbs, bro. You work with him. You develop him. Like, yo, we might need you. We need you to be confident. We need you to get better.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe He was one of those unfortunate pieces that got caught up in being lost in transition. Like, yo,
Sure.
if his debut had been under Al Golden, would it have looked like that? If he had known exactly, it been in something that he knew, this is what I've been doing for 2 years. But now there's a switch, there's a change. Like I said, I'm just throwing some things out. You stay with kids like that in your program because you never know in their third or fourth year, you might get good. You might not get elite. You might not get first day NFL draft, but good at Notre Dame, we'll take some of that as well.
What also begs the question too is, like, is nickel the best position for Carson Hobbs?
That's another question.
He can contribute somewhere. I don't know if that spot is nickel.
Yeah.
He's a 6'1", long, rangy boundary corner when I look at him. He can contribute somewhere. The thing that I didn't love about what the secondary did as a whole, and this is everybody combined, is the fact that Carson Hobbs only played 30 snaps in the final 10 games. I feel like he could have contributed somewhere else that wasn't just at nickel. And that's how you start working in getting his confidence back a little bit. Now, I'm also not naive to the fact that the talent coming up behind him is also tremendous. So it's give or take on either side, but I'm with you there with Carson Hobbs, Sean. I am. I get where you're coming from. Let's kind of tie a bow on this thing and run through some reasons for optimism here, because I know it's been some doom and gloom and there's some questions and there's some things that we just don't know yet. But that being said, it's coming from a foundation of we are really optimistic about this team. And it is absolutely loaded with talent. And that's kind of the common theme here, Sean. And so the reason for optimism, I mean, look, we won't spend too much time on it, but for the quarterback position, you do have a returning starter. For the first offseason that I can remember in the last 4 years, you don't have a quarterback that has to come in January or in April or March and then start learning the playbook and be taught the playbook by a younger player. You now have a quarterback in the room that can kind of lead that charge, and he's your starter. Not only is Gino Guidugli going to be not only is Gino Guidugli going to be responsible for the development of Blake Hebert, but now for the first time in a while, a Notre Dame backup quarterback can look to the starter to also help him develop. That's going to be huge. Notre Dame hasn't had that in a while from a playbook standpoint. Experience, sure. I know the experiences that Riley Leonard had in college. He was able to pass that down. But to Notre Dame specifically, I think that's huge. Having a returning starter quarterback, yes, there's a lot of concerns of does he take the step that we think he's going to? What does the development look like? But overall, it's a net positive because 13 is going to be back in the blue and gold starting under center next September. It's going to be absolutely huge, Sean. No way around it. And then we have questions about the supporting cast around him. But we have questions about what our questions are more of who steps up and who doesn't. But the reason why we can even ask ourselves that question is because it's loaded with talent. Absolutely loaded with talent. Again, we've never questioned the talent in the running back room, the tight end room, the wide receiver room. It's just a question of who emerges. But the positive is you have a starting lineup right there. If Notre Dame elected to not go to the portal for any of those positions, I would be okay. I would understand where they came from if they were confident in some of those guys. Like if they said, hey, I know, the name Nick Marsh is floated out there. Omarion Miller entered the transfer portal. KJ Duff entered the transfer portal. But hey, in the boundary, we're going to rock with Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert. I would be okay with that. I would. Because it's twofold. One, they have confidence in those players. And two, it forces Mike Brown's hand to develop a homegrown wide receiver at the boundary. I think that would be huge. And then finally, Sean, reason for optimism in the offensive line room is you have your starting five currently in the room. Whatever combination he decides to go with, the transfer portal, in my opinion, is not an option for the offensive line, barring them losing like 5 guys to the portal. So reason for optimism is we don't know what the combination is going to be yet, but your entire 2 deep, I'll even say, is currently in the room right now. There's not a lot of other schools in the country that can say that, Sean. Not a lot of other programs in the country that can say our entire 2 deep on the offensive line is currently in South Bend. And that's a huge plus. It's a huge plus.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. When you talk about optimism, you can just start with the talent. Not only talent, the depth, right? Whether it be young talent, you have a question about inexperienced talent. When you're talking about the running back room as far as carrying the heavy load, that's fine. CJ Carr, we don't foresee any problem. As much as we talk about a concern about Notre Dame having a quarterback that progresses as it goes into his second year, I don't think we're really concerned that that's not going to happen, because you have Mike Denbrock once again, who's getting better. We talked about him being able to get to certain things because of other rooms that are coming along. And I think we're going to see that. And I think CJ is going to be able to take advantage of that. I think that's also a group of wide receivers that he has a great relationship with and connection with, something he didn't necessarily have with the Malachi Fields. These are guys he came in with or he's played with multiple years. He has a great relationship going back to the Irish invasion with Cam Williams and Jack Larson. That was that trio that got everything started in that class from an offensive standpoint. So maybe they come along together and take that next step. You know, of course, we all hope that happens. But I agree with you. But for me, I think the most impactful room is that offensive line, Trev. I'll be honest. Offensive line is my biggest concern on the offensive side of the ball. My eyes will be on Mike Brown for specific reasons. But my concern, because of the things that you laid out, where are guys going to be placed? Because I don't trust that they can be placed in the right positions. That's why it's the biggest concern for me. I don't trust that.
Yeah. No, I get that completely. I'm in the same boat as you are.
So,
like, it's very much show me mode, Sean.
Yeah.
Show me that you can put the guys in the right spot and not have to have injuries to do it.
Yeah. To force your hand. Yeah. I agree totally. Huge. I agree totally with that. So for me, that is going to be one of the biggest things offensively, if not the biggest thing. Like I said, CJ's not a concern to me. Aeneas, Kedron, I'm not concerned about what they can do when given the opportunity.
Sure.
But I know they're not going to look like the other two dudes. It's not going to look like that. It can be just as effective, but it's not going to look like that.
100%.
And since it's not going to look like that, then the guys in front of them blocking for them have to be better and have to have an attitude. They have to.
100%. We said it all season. It starts up front. I mean, you're likely going to have a quarterback that's going to be top 3 in preseason Heisman expectations.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm literally sitting here waiting for FanDuel to put out the lines. And they probably will when the season gets over. I know some outlets already have CJ Carr as like the odds-and favorite to win the Heisman in 2026.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even invited to the ceremony.
I'm sure Arch will be back up there.
Julian Sayin will be back up there.
Sayin will be back up there. Yeah. Whomever Indiana has a quarterback will be up there.
I mean, at this point.
At this point,
yeah.
Dante Moore, like you said, if Dante Moore comes back, he'll be up there.
Yep. Jeremiah Smith will be up there.
Jeremiah Smith. It will definitely be loaded.
Yep.
It would be cool to see Kenny with some odds, depending upon where he lands. That would be cool. Yeah, that would.
Think about this though, Sean. When was the last time we entered a season where Notre Dame's starting quarterback was an odds-and favorite to win the Heisman in the preseason?
Was it Brady?
It was probably Brady Quinn in 06.
Had to be Brady.
Yeah, man.
Sam Hartman probably has some odds.
He did as the season progressed. He was playing like a Heisman favorite in the first 4 games. He was going absolutely nuts.
Yeah, he probably has some. Yeah. You said preseason, though. But
but preseason, it was probably Brady Quinn.
Yeah, I don't think Riley had preseason odds. Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see.
You're right. You're right. Man, you know what? Everett probably would have had preseason odds coming off the way he played in that championship game against Alabama. Everett Golson probably would have had some odds.
Yeah, in 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, did
Deshaun have any odds preseason?
I'm not sure.
Coming off that 2016, 2015, he played well.
He did. I just don't know if he did, because at that point in time, it was a question of who was even going to start. So I don't know if they were going to put lines out for him if they didn't know if Malik was going to come back and be the starter. That was probably, if he wasn't in there, that's probably why, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Let's talk reasons for optimism on the defensive side of the ball, Sean. And this one is very, very simple. It's the talent, and we can kind of lump it all into that. This might be the best defensive end rotation in the country in 2026 between Boubacar Traore, Bryce Young, Josh Burnham. I mean, that three-headed monster alone is going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah,
absolutely huge. And I echo the same sentiment for the linebacker room. Might be the best combination of talent, depth, and experience at linebacker in the country. Yeah. It's kind of like this. Yes, they're in search for a new linebackers coach. Max Bullough took a job at Michigan State. Super understandable. But I view whoever steps in as the new linebackers coach is going to kind of understand where Jaywan Sider stepped in last year in the running back room. Of like, hey, I'm just taking over a crazy situation. Crazy good. Like, all right, who do I have to work with? Oh, okay, Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliama-Asa, Jaden Ausberry, Madden Framo, potentially Jalen Sneed, Bodie Cahoon, Thomas Davis Jr., Kahanu Kia, his younger brother. I mean, that's a winning situation. So the reasons for optimism at linebacker are endless. I mean, our biggest area of concern with the linebacker room is just when Kingston comes back, not if he comes back from injury. It's just when. What's his workload? And the linebacker room is so deep that they don't need him to be back at 100% full go playing 40 snaps a game in week 1. That's where the linebacker room is at. And then the secondary, we already kind of touched on it when we talked about some of the concerns. But, Sean, your starting lineup is most likely going to be a Don Schuler, Tay Johnson, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, and Dallas Gold. Does it get better than that in college football? I don't think so. It's a crazy spot to be in, man. The reasons for optimism on defense are endless. And the biggest concern on defense overarching, we didn't even talk about. Will Chris Ash build on how they ended the season? Or will he revert back to the philosophy and the scheme that was in the first 3 games? We don't know. But the reasons for optimism are endless. So I know that this segment was a little doom and gloom, guys, but the reasons for optimism with this team in general are just endless. Just endless. And it's a really, really promising way to start the offseason. Now it's about maintaining the roster, developing the young talent that you have. And if they're able to do those things, Notre Dame's probably going to be a preseason top 7 team and not 7th.
Let me tell you something. You hit on the defensive end. I was texting, guys, I was raised texting Trev during the Texas A&M Miami game. Trev was a good shoulder for me this weekend because I was irritated by so many things watching that game. But there's someone that I think has given us all optimism. Your Armel Mukam, I think, is Armel Mukam for you is Logan Thomas for Brian. Right? And there's always been wonder, what's going on? Why can't he get snaps coming off the edge? What's up? And so just to give you a little tidbit, I'm watching the game and I'm seeing Maurice Lightfoot make plays in a playoff game for Miami. And that was literally the choice in their recruiting class for Notre Dame, Maurice Lightfoot or Logan Thomas. And Logan Thomas was the choice. And like I said, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, this kid's making plays, but our guy can't even get in. Can't even get on the field. I know that he has 2 NFL edge guys in front of him, but he's still able to play. Like 2 day 1, day 2 guys. Like, but somehow, some way, he's still able to get in and make plays. And our guy that we thought was the better of the 2 can't get his opportunity. So that's a guy that I know for a fact that Brian has been very optimistic about. I think he's definitely talented from the 2. Just from him getting the snaps that he's gotten, he flashes. So I'm optimistic about him. I'm optimistic about Armel Mukam. I'm optimistic about Sean Sevillano Jr. because I feel like he's in the same position that Gabriel Rubio. Well, Gabriel Rubio was in a position where we weren't even sure where he was going to be a part of this program. And he wasn't as productive as most people thought he should have been on the field.
Sure.
And a lot of people are saying, where's Sean Sevillano Jr.? I think his time could be coming to be that Gabriel Rubio type for this defense, to be that run stuffer, to be one of those big guys on the inside.
Be that plugger.
Now could be his time. He's been behind the scenes putting in the work. You saw him get in spots second half of the season, make plays. But I think now I'm optimistic about his time because I think he can do the same thing that Gabriel Rubio was able to do. And he's done it quietly without the off the field personal distractions and all of that. But the edge you talked about, I'm optimistic about Cole Mullins, who I think I saw a lot from on the interior. Like, he could be a playmaker. This kid could be a playmaker. Now, I don't know where he's going to play from a weight standpoint, Trev, where he's eventually going to settle. But I'm very optimistic about that young man. Very optimistic. I didn't like the move initially, but I think he's going to be able to do some things.
Yeah, well, absolutely. He flashed. It was Purdue, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of when he got a good chunk of snaps. He flashed.
Him and Elijah Hughes on that day, both flashed. Now, I'll tell you 2 guys on the edge that you talked about, Christopher Burgess Jr. and Dominic Hulick, both from the 25 class. Dominic Hulick, we've been hearing his name during practices all year. He could be that next Josh Burnham to me. Recruited as a linebacker when they started recruiting him and got him. His senior year, he moved to defensive line. He wanted to make that move specifically because of where he thought he was going to end up when he got to college. He was a game wrecker as linebacker. He's a game wrecker coming off the edge. And he comes in and practices, and now you hear him from the coaching staff. That's a guy that I'm optimistic about. I think he could be that next Josh Burnham. Like, he could grow, and as he grows, he ends up being very impactful because we expect great things from Josh Burnham, the way he played second half of the season.
100%.
When he finally started getting snaps, I won't hold you. But, hey. So I'm optimistic. And Chris Burgess Jr. It's to a point now, is he going to stay on the edge or is he going to be inside? But either way, I think next year, I think that young man is going to be impactful. I think he was one of the prizes, very quietly, one of the prizes of that 25 class, right? And he's a kid that loves Notre Dame. Like, he just loves Notre Dame. I remember him watching the national title game and watching the playoff games and, like, putting it on social media and, like, the excitement he had. And, like, he loves it. He loves it. And he's extremely talented.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the guys up front that I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about KBA coming back. I am. I'm optimistic about his return. I think he's going to be fine. I think the fact that he doesn't have to come back and just be a guy or be rushed back, take your time. Your boys are going to hold it down for you. Do we see a Thomas Davis Jr. come in and do what Madden Ferrimo was able to do? Like, when you get to the second half of the season, maybe he adds some depth to that rotation. Jalen Sneed, we'll see what happens with him. Drake Bowen, of course. I think Drake Bowen got better this year. I think he's going to be even better next year. The kid just keeps getting better.
Yeah, he does.
There's no question about who the leader is on the defense. Not in my opinion. There's no question. So, but I'm really excited. I go back to that play Matt Faramo made against, I think it was that Boise State? Was that Boise State where he tipped that ball?
That was Purdue.
Purdue. You're right. Dude, that right there was like when the first time I was like, okay, this kid's gonna be okay. he's gonna be okay. He just needs the opportunity. He's gonna be fine.
Well, we talked about it, Sean, in the offseason. It was you and I standing next to each other at camp.
At camp,
at camp. And I was like, the second that light bulb goes on for 19, he is going to be hard to keep off the field.
Yes, sir.
And around Purdue time, that light bulb came on.
Yep.
Here we are.
Yep.
Yeah, man. The future at linebacker is bright. Very, very bright. That's for sure.
Yep. Now, defensive back. Let me tell you why. And can I allow me to roll this into like something people have been talking about in the chat, like with the individual that hopped into the portal today. Okay. This is a byproduct of, and Trev, we talked about this before we even started the show, man. When you start stacking recruiting classes like Notre Dame is stacking, when you start stacking number 3 on one publication, number 1 on another publication, and you stack a defensive back class like Notre Dame is stacked. Look, the numbers just don't add up, and they're not going to add up. And in the new age of, what is pretty much a salary cap, it's just so many contributing factors, right? So you got the numbers of talent, then you have issues with, we have to prioritize this guy. Then you have a kid like Ethan Long that pops at the end of the year. And let's be honest, it's a dude coming in that has, I can't speak and nor will I speak for the coaching staff. But from my eyes, Joey O'Brien looks like he's going to hit the field and like from day one, like, okay, we're going to have to find a way to get this dude on the field because he just makes plays. I watched the championship game highlights, and I'm like, he's making a pick here, he's making a pick here, he's catching like 50-50 balls down. He's just a playmaker. He's just a playmaker. Like, so all of that is in consideration. And so what you're going to see moving forward as Notre Dame stacks is there are going to be unfortunate situations where you might lose some very talented players and great young men to the portal. When I saw Tabor Benny Powell jump into the portal, and by no means am I putting him on the same level as anyone that I've previously mentioned, but it was like tough because I'm like, I thought he could be a sleeper in his class. He was like one of my sleepers in that class. And the opportunity just is like, nah, man, the road just isn't there. But someone's going to get a really good player and a great young man, right? And it's the same thing with the young man to jump in the portal today. Somebody's going to get a really good to great player and a heck of a young man, right? But the room doesn't, and this is not disparaging, the room doesn't take a step back. You lose 2 guys like that, but you're sitting here saying, that's still an elite room. Like, that's still an elite room. So it's just unfortunate. I don't like where the business of college football is. I don't like it. You know why, Trev? It's because everybody has to think business now.
Yeah.
Kids can't even think just going to college and football now. Everybody has to think business. Like, you're preparing for finals and now you're getting calls from your agent. Like, dude, what? Like, do I have 3 finals this week? Oh, it is what it is, though. It is what it is.
In this day and age of college football, there's going to be roster attrition, and it's unfortunate. And the salary cap put on forth by the House settlement is going to further that. But losing a player like Jadon Blair stinks. I won't lie. I mean,
Absolutely.
I spent all offseason talking about how, man, I imagine a day when it's just Jadon Blair and Joey O'Brien just holding down the back end of the defense, 2 6'5" safeties. But think of it this way. I think that's also a testament. Now, we're going to get into this a little bit later. It's already going on in the premium message boards.irishbreakdown.com. But we're at a spot where Notre Dame's talent level is so deep that it's not like they're losing somebody that was going to be a starter next season. I think he would have been in the rotation, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But barring some sort of injury, he wasn't going to be in the starting lineup, unfortunately, whether you agree or disagree with that. But I point back to Kennedy Urlacher. He transferred this past season because the room was just that deep and he knew where he stood. By the end of the season, he was starting for USC. Alongside another safety that was almost a unanimous All-American in Bishop Fitzgerald. I mean, he played 72 snaps against Oregon and got a pick. Like, it's just some days you're going to, in some years, you're just going to lose talented football players. I'm not saying I agree with it. And Sean, I'm with you. I hate the state. I hate the current state of college football right now.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the talent level in the secondary is just, it's unbelievably loaded. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's really what we're watching, right? But once again, these are questions that have been answered by Marcus Freeman and his staff, right? Because the safety position for a long time at Notre Dame was like, yo, we need to upgrade. And now we're talking about losing an extremely talented young man to the portal, or 2 talented young men to the portal. And it's like, oh, we're good. We're good. So a lot has turned around in a few seasons.
It has. No, it really has, man. Folks, that's going to do it for part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to wrap this all up and get into the final segment of RTCF, talk some big picture college football. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, in the final part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to be talking about big picture college football. And we're going to be talking about the first round of the playoff games that went down this past weekend. And a lot of different takeaways, man. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of recap some of the games, give a little refresher of how those went, because I know some people just didn't flat out watch the games. I know some people are just kind of keeping an eye on a scoreboard, watching, others sat down and watched it. And then we're going to talk about what we learned and then what we kind of confirmed from this playoffs. And then we're going to talk about out of the 4 teams, this should be an interesting discussion, but we're going to talk about out of those 4 teams who we believe could potentially make it the farthest in the playoffs out of those 4 first-rounders. But, Sean, quick recap. The Friday night game, it was Alabama versus Oklahoma. The Crimson Tide were on the road in Norman, Oklahoma. They ended up coming back from 17 points down, and they won 34-24. And then on Saturday, you had the full slate. You had Texas A&M and Miami kicking off at, for whatever reason, 11 a.m. local time, their time. I don't know why that wasn't the night game. But you had Texas A&M hosting Miami in the 7-10 game, and then Miami won in just a low-scoring, kind of ugly 10-3. And then the two other games on Saturday, Sean, kind of went exactly how we thought that they would go. I mean, you had Ole Miss host Tulane. They won 41-10. They won by 31 points. And then you had Oregon play James Madison. They won by 17. But, Sean, the game was not as competitive as what the final score showed in the slightest. No. So what were some of your kind of big picture takeaways? What were some things that you learned from this past weekend in college football in the playoffs?
May I submit Exhibit 1219? 2 SEC teams that are frauds, that have no shot of winning the national championship. And you can question whether or not they should have been, both teams. You can question whether or not they should have been in the college football playoff. And it was on full display. Both teams gave you a half of why they shouldn't. You go to SEC Network, they want to gloss about the comeback and no. Don't act like the committee. They gave a great first half against a rival. That's why we felt like they should have been. We're judging halves now. Okay, since you set the standard, your check of judging halves concerning Alabama, they gave you one half of why they were abysmal and why they got spanked coming down the tail end of their schedule and played terrible football. Okay? Then in order to get back in the game, they needed help from a team that showed you why, when they got up 17-0, that they're abysmal and awful. So you had evidence from both teams in that matchup. Alabama's not winning a national championship. I don't think their defense really stopped Oklahoma. I really don't. I know Indiana has a better offense. Indiana has a better offensive line. Indiana has a better defense. In totality, you could debate whether or not Oklahoma has a better defensive line than Indiana. But collectively, I just watched Indiana against Ohio State. I feel pretty comfortable with what they can do defensively against Alabama.
Yeah.
I can. So for me, that was evidence. Then I go to Exhibit 1220. Okay? Which I have no clue. I still have no clue how in the world we gave up 41 points to Texas A&M. I'm sitting there saying, I knew this is who Marcel Reed was. I knew it. I knew this is who he was. And all Miami did was be aggressive. Trev, that's all they did. They were aggressive. They shut down the run. They made him a passer. They were willing to give up a few scrambles. And they played physical. They played fast and physical. That's all Miami did. And guess what he did? He made mistakes. I look on the other side. Carson Beck didn't play. Carson Beck is exactly who I thought he was going to be in a big game. Pedestrian. That's it. And I'm just sitting there, Trev, saying, you got to be kidding me. But I will say, unlike Alabama, if Carson Beck doesn't make the big mistakes, they'll have a chance because of that front four. They'll have a chance. They will have a chance because of their front four. Against Georgia and Ohio State, they will have a chance. And because they can run the ball. Now, whether or not Shannon Dawson stops being pretty and cute and actually they could have done that to Texas A&M all 4 quarters. He was too busy trying to put together trick plays, which I understand when you have a talent like Malachi Toney, you want to get the ball to him as many times as you can in as many ways as you can. But that was a game like, dude, just get a ball to Mark Fletcher and just pound these dudes because they can't stop it. Every time they lined up and went in between guard tackle, Texas A&M had no answer for Mark Fletcher. No answer. So Miami's one of those teams that even though it infuriated me once again, like how do we lose to this team? Like why in the world is this place kicker now missing all the field goals? Well, now he can't. Both Brandy Bond couldn't miss against Notre Dame. Davis couldn't miss against Notre Dame. And both of them, every kicker on both teams, it's just horrible. It was just infuriating, bro. I was saying, you got to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me with this.
I know, bro. You texted me and you're like, oh, okay.
I'm like, this is ridiculous, man. This is ridiculous. What am I watching? And yes, dude, Mario Cristobal, still not a good in-game coach. And I'm watching Elko flinch. Like, dude, why are you calling fake punts? Like, back them up. Your defense, dude, back them up. Don't do that. Don't give them the ball, right? Look, I think it was a poorly played game. It was sloppy. I think it was a poorly coached game in many aspects. I thought Colin Klein was just early on was like super passive. I'm like, dude, take shots. Like, what are you doing? It was just one of those games where it was frustrating. It was frustrating. But I think Miami has a shot. I think they have enough to be able to win some games. Do I think they're going to? That's another conversation. The other two games, Trev, I'm done. I don't even want to discuss those games. I was busy, honestly. I was watching more Bears and Packers at that point.
That's fair. You had to lock in for that NFL game. I get you.
NFL games,
I get you. I mean, look, man, here's my big picture takeaways from this past weekend. And this is kind of all encompassing of what I learned and what was confirmed. The two offenses in those two games, in the Alabama-Oklahoma game and in the Miami-Texas A&M game, all four of those offenses, Sean, they were what we thought that they were. Now, I will say this. I will always be a person to give credit where credit is due. This is the first time all season, and he picked a heck of a time to do it. This was the first time all season that down 17, I didn't see Ty Simpson get that look. That look of, okay, this moment's too big for me. That's the first time all season. And I guess glass half full, if you're going to pick any day and any time of the season to not get that look, it is in the playoffs. But with that being said, I think that game was more smoke and mirrors, Sean. In the NFL, when it's like the Titans play the Raiders and the final score is like 27-21, and it's like kind of close at the end of the game, and it's like, hey, like this is actually a pretty good game. But my takeaway isn't, oh, these two teams are slept on. That's my takeaway is these were just kind of two teams. That's how I felt watching the Alabama-Oklahoma game, if I'm being honest. I was watching it with a buddy. He's an Alabama fan. His dad's from Mobile, Alabama, and we were sitting down. We were watching it together, and I was like, God, this is just ugly football. Just flat-out ugly football. John Mateer is who I thought that he was. This Alabama offense was what I thought that it was. 25 rushing yards on 22 attempts. Come on. That might be able to work against Oklahoma, another middle-of-the-road SEC team that got to host a playoff game. That's not working against IU. Just won't. And then my takeaway from the Texas A&M Miami game was, again, these offenses were like Texas A&M on defense did two of the three things that they needed to win that football game. They did. They were the first team all season that was able to contain Malachi Toney. First defense all year to be able to contain Malachi Toney. They didn't let Carson Beck get comfortable in the pocket, pick him apart. Finished the game with like 140 passing yards. Went into halftime with like 30. But the thing that they failed to do was limit the run. Mark Fletcher had 174 rushing yards on like 17 carries. Averaged 10 yards a pop. A lot of people talk about how do you get Carson Beck off of his game. It's like you can pressure him physically. I think the mental pressure debilitates Carson Beck more than the physical pressure. They both do. But when Carson Beck is in a situation where it's like, oh, run game's not going, I have to make something happen, that's when he starts turning the ball over. That's why they lost against Louisville. Because the rushing attack was non-existent. And so Carson Beck felt like he had to force the issue. What happened, Sean? He threw 4 picks. Texas A&M wasn't able to sell out and stop the run, unfortunately. And then their offense, like you said, Marcel, even in the game against Notre Dame when he had 300 passing yards, he still completed 50% of his passes. It's just really easy to complete passes to slot receivers that just don't get covered for 35 yards. But think about all the deep shots he missed in that game. Like, Miami's secondary is very susceptible to big plays. Look at what Notre Dame did with a first-time starter and a redshirt freshman at quarterback in the second half. They're like, oh, we can take shots over the top. I'm not saying Miami's secondary is bad. It's just not like the reputation that their secondary has is strongly carried by the performance of their front four in the defensive line. Like, they don't have a Leonard Moore at cornerback. They don't have a Tay Johnson or a Don Schuler at safety. Shoot, I don't even know if they have a Christian Gray. They have a bunch of good players. but they don't have like this elite lockdown secondary. It's just they benefit from the fact that a lot of opposing quarterbacks don't have time to get the football off. So who knows? But then my second biggest takeaway from this weekend, Sean, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this too. I think the time off this year in the playoffs hurt teams more this year than it did last year. Like, there was sloppy football played. Like, it was just downright sloppy. I mean, Oklahoma's punter straight up just dropped the football. Like, it didn't get blocked. He just caught the snap and then just dropped the ball.
Was that the Oregon game where their blocker got pushed into the punter? It was just crazy stuff happening.
Sloppy. Like, and they had a couple weeks off. I understand that, but I feel like in last year's playoff, it wasn't this sloppy. Like, there were just some bad football being played. Really bad football. And unfortunately, my takeaway from the first round, more so the top two games, was the winners of those games wasn't who played the best football. It was just who played the least bad football. And that's not good for playoffs. Like, that's just such a gross conversation to have. I mean, honestly, my biggest surprise of the day, the over-under on FanDuel for the Alabama-Oklahoma game was like 39.5. And I'm amazed that the over hit. That was my biggest surprise of the entire weekend. It was a pick'em game. The spread was 1.5 in favor of Oklahoma. And when you get a 3-point bump for being the home team, they literally saw that as a pick'em game. But a lot of the things that we had talked about, Sean, all season long about, hey, this offense isn't as good as what you think that it might be, that started to get exposed in the first round of the playoffs. And I think for the winners in the first round, that's going to continue to get exposed, gearing up to play Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, and Texas Tech. Like that. And then, like you said, the final two games, Sean, not even worth. I mean, they were what we thought. Now,
let me dig deep, right? Because this might be conspiracy theory type stuff. Not conspiracy theory, but just, going out there a little bit.
Okay, you getting the tinfoil hat on, Sean?
I wouldn't say tinfoil now. But I guess, maybe tinfoil. But no, in all seriousness, there's something about the SEC Big Ten combination for a team that's trying to prove that they've taken that next step. We saw Notre Dame have to go through the same thing with Georgia, Penn State back to back. They didn't celebrate after they beat Indiana. I was like, all right, we're supposed to win. We're at home. We're better than them. But that Georgia game meant something. It was the playoff, but like for the program and for Marcus Freeman to prove in recruiting to the people in the program and to himself that, okay, we're ready now in a big game to beat a top tier SEC program. They slayed that. Miami slayed that. I wonder after that, you saw how they reacted. You saw how emotional they were after winning that game. How do they pull it together emotionally to now take on a Big Ten team? The same way, because Notre Dame came out a little flat against Penn State. They came off of that big win and what it meant perception-wise, as long as the college football playoff. Then they go face a Penn State team that's waiting on them. And it's like, okay. Ooh, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic for me. Can Miami take it up a notch in that game? Because they're going to have to. Because if they come out flat or anywhere near the level they played against Texas A&M, that's going to be over quick. That game's going to be over really fast. It's going to be over really fast. So
the other interesting factor too, Sean, is this is the first playoff where we've seen two away teams pick up wins.
True. Yeah.
I wonder, I know they get a break, but will travel play any sort of factor in, Alabama's playing the quarterfinals and Miami's playing the quarterfinals? I think there's a long enough break where maybe not, but we just haven't seen it. You know what I mean? All 4 of the home teams won last year. Penn State won at home, Texas won at home, Notre Dame won at home, and Ohio State won at home. I think that's very interesting. Very interesting for sure.
Did you have a problem with like the locker room stuff they were saying? I didn't have a problem. Look, man, when you're talking trash, you got to be able to dish it out and take it. Jeremiah Love said something on social media. He got it back. I personally didn't have a problem with it. Now, unless I didn't hear something that was said, unless they called him out his name. Jeremiah Love shot the first shot on social media. I was kind of shocked that he even said anything. I was like, man, how do you even make that choice?
Yeah.
Like, did you make the choice because you had a good game against Texas A&M and you didn't have a good game against Miami, and Miami fans have been talking about how much they shut you down, even though you really didn't get enough carries to be considered to be shut down? The entire thing was just weird to me. Just Jeremiah even putting something out. And then when you put something out, you have to know if it goes the other way. You have to know that young men at that age are going to react and post something on social media. Like, I hope we're not naive enough to think they would just turn the other cheek, because they said something to the Texas A&M offensive linemen that were chirping, and the Miami defensive line said something to the Texas A&M running back that was chirping. They just said it after the game. Texas A&M was doing all their chirping leading up to the game. So I just felt like it came with the territory, man. I was like,
yeah, I've been seeing people in the chat say that the J Love thing was fake and he actually didn't say anything. I honestly didn't even see it. Like, I didn't see the J Love post. This is just kind of my overall philosophy, I guess, on trash talk. I don't like when people trash talk after they get the result that they want. Like, if you're going to talk trash, I feel like you have to do it from start to finish. You know what I'm saying? That's how I feel. That's just me personally. Like, I was a chirper when I played sports, and win or lose, I would do it. But I wouldn't wait to see if we won. You know what I'm saying? To then start. That's my only thing that bothers me.
See, you know what? You're right, Trev. You're right, because now that I think back, which I'm sure is different now, Trev. Like, this social media age and like the need to put stuff on social media. I'm with you though, because I respect you not talking leading up to the game, but if you're beating that dude during the game, by all means, talk your trash. Talk your trash on the field in between the lines.
Yep. Like,
well, dude, we're smacking this running back all game. Like, dude, I'm here all day. You're not going anywhere. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, once it's done, handshakes, respect, go do the press conference, go to the next game. That's why I worry about them emotionally. I feel like Miami spent a lot emotionally during the game, and you saw after the game. Dude, you got a much bigger giant in front of you. That's going to take a much bigger effort. Like, if you wasted all of that, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. But I just know how this generation of young players, we see it every week, Trev. Every week in college football, we see it.
Well, and now I think we're gonna start to see it divide. Sean, you and I talk all the time. We talk to Brian all the time about, for some programs, the goal isn't to win a national championship. It's just to make the playoffs. And that, at least that's how it's perceived. And that's how they go about their business sometimes. It's like, we talked about it when USC ended the rivalry with Notre Dame. Talked about that earlier today. Is that USC doesn't want to compete for a national championship. If they truly did, then they would want to compete against Notre Dame, a team that just played for a national championship. And a team that probably could have this season if they weren't snubbed from the playoffs. I'm very curious for teams like Miami and Alabama this season of, like, how do you show up to that quarterfinal game? Are you okay with just hey, we got a playoff win. Some people didn't think we should have made it. Now that we have a win, like I'm cool with whatever the result is. How is that mindset going to be? Or is it true? Because believe me, I know Ohio State isn't sitting around just happy that they made it. I know Georgia and Kirby Smart aren't just sitting around happy that they made it. They have a much bigger picture in mind. Do Miami and Alabama have that same picture? Or with all the drama that's been going on leading up to the selection, are they just happy that they got a seat at the table? I think that's going to play a big factor in the quarterfinals. I really do. And I think we're going to find out. I'm not saying definitively one way or the other. I'm just saying that we don't know. Common consensus here, Sean, to kind of wrap this up. Are you under the impression that out of the 4 winners from this weekend, you think Miami is in the position to make it the farthest? Not matchup wise, just how they are as a team. Are they geared to make it the farthest out of all of the round 1 winners?
Of the round 1 winners, Oregon plays Georgia.
Yeah, so the next round matchups.
Ooh, that's Kirby against Lanning. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, these matchups are going to be very interesting. You get Miami and Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Miami and Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve, and then on New Year's Day, you get Oregon and Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl.
Texas Tech, okay.
Alabama and IU in the Rose Bowl, and then Ole Miss and Georgia.
Right.
In the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, that's the rematch. I'm sorry. So, yeah, because I can look back at that first matchup in between the hedges and say, oh, neutral field. Ole Miss was right there, but Georgia's a different team to me. Georgia's just a different team than what I saw that day defensively. I think the emergence of Ellis Robinson at the other defensive back has helped a lot. Their safeties are playing much better. And for the last 3 games, they found a pass rush. They've been able to get to the quarterback. So that's something that they did not do against Ole Miss. So, and then I don't know the status. Ole Miss lost their running back to an injury. So, how healthy is he going to be in that game? Because he's really the star of that. They play a lot of wide open or spread offense. They like to throw the ball, and Trinidad Chambliss is absolutely amazing. But 5 can get it, man. Lace is that's a darn good running back they have at Ole Miss. And if he's not 100%, I really question whether or not they can get anything done. I think Oregon against Texas Tech is interesting. I do. I think it's interesting because I just don't know about that Texas Tech offense, Trev. I like the defense, especially the front 7. I don't know about that offense, man. And if the Oregon wide receivers are getting back healthy, and it's going to be very interesting how those these are going to be the best tight ends Texas Tech's linebackers have seen all year. To me, that's a key matchup. That's a key matchup. They haven't seen pass catchers like this that they're going to have to cover in space.
Agreed.
And how does Oregon use that to open up the run game? Because they want to run with their trio of running backs. But how does Texas Tech kind of deal with those tight ends? I think that's going to be interesting. I think that might end up being one of the better games of the quarterfinals.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. Biggest matchup for me. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying outside Miami or Oregon. The 2 teams that I think have a chance to go forward.
The biggest matchup in that Oregon-Texas Tech game for me is Texas Tech's offensive line versus Oregon's defensive line. Oregon has a very underrated skill set in the trenches, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if Cameron Dickey can't get going for Texas Tech, their running back tandem down there in Lubbock, if they can't get going, and it all has to be on Baron Morton, and you can let guys like Uiagalelei pin his ears back, get after the quarterback a little bit, like that is a very interesting matchup. I agree with you completely. But Yeah, I would say the two out of the first round are Miami and Oregon. It's just, again, with Oregon and Ole Miss, it's so tough to gauge because of who they played in the first round.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
that's what's tough. But I'm with you. I'm with you, man. Well, folks, that is going to do it for it. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No. Which quarterback do you trust the most in the matchups in the quarterfinals?
Oh, boy. I mean, I'll say this. The Miami-Ohio State matchup is easy. I trust Julian Sayin over Carson Beck. I know Carson Beck has like all this experience. He's like a 5th, 6th-year senior. But like I said, I don't think his supporting cast is as good as what Julian Sayin has, offense and defense. And I think Ohio State is more built to where they don't have to have Julian Sayin put the team on his back.
Yeah.
I think Carson Beck in Miami, there will be a point in the playoffs where Carson Beck will have to put the team on his back, and I just don't think he's going to be able to succeed because he hasn't yet when that's been the case in his collegiate career. So in that matchup, I'd go Ohio State. I would take Julian Sayin. In the Indiana-Alabama matchup, I trust Fernando Mendoza more than I trust Ty Simpson. Like, I gave Ty Simpson credit for not getting that look in that game. That's also the outlier. That was the one time he didn't. But he got that look in the SEC championship game. He had that look against Florida State. Yeah. He had that look for a little bit against Georgia in the first matchup. He had that look a little bit against South Carolina. So that's the outlier. So I trust Fernando Mendoza there. Georgia Ole Miss, I think, is a little bit more interesting than what people think.
Yes, it is. I understand why you would say that. I do.
Like, that's the Georgia Ole Miss matchup is interesting because I know a lot of people would go with the vet, Gunnar Stockton. He played in the playoffs last season and lost to the team that played for a national title. I get all of that. Dude, Trinidad Chambliss has kind of been balling.
Man.
Yeah, that one's tough. Like,
now that what we talked about earlier, the concern about the backup, no one even thought about it when they went out and got him in the portal. Everybody was like, we can't wait to see Austin Simmons. Remember that? Everyone's Austin Simmons. That's the kid at quarterback we can't wait to see play. Jackson Dart's out of there. It's his time. He goes down, and here we are in the playoffs talking about this kid probably being more trusted in a playoff game than Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong. It's crazy. And then for the Oregon-Texas Tech game, gosh. I'll go Dante Moore. He showed me something on the road against Iowa. Like, you're out with – he didn't have Kenyon Sadiq. He didn't have Evan Stewart. He didn't have DeCorian Moore. He didn't have Gary Bryant. And still they found a way to win. Like, he's had more of those performances than what Baron Morton has had. Now, Baron Morton's been lighting it on fire, but they've just been beating the brakes out of teams in the Big 12.
Yeah.
So he hasn't had to have that moment, you know what I mean? Of like, hey, backs are against the wall. This isn't working. Half of our receiving core is out. I got this. And I got to see that from Dante Moore. That's what gives him the edge in my eyes.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love the stories surrounding these quarterfinal games. Kirby versus Lanning, that connection, the rematch, Georgia, Ole Miss. I meant the rematch of Georgia, Ole Miss, and then you got Texas Tech going up against. I think Texas Tech, their staff talks a lot. I think Lanning talks a lot. So I love that narrative. I love Miami going up against Ohio State, going back to 2002, that championship game, BCS championship game, all of that coming forward. Ohio State, Miami fans feeling like it's time for us to get our payback. I love the story around that. And then Indiana and Alabama, I think the chance for Indiana, this is one of those prove-it games for them, right? They beat Ohio State, but that's like in the Big Ten. This is them having an opportunity because everybody puts at the SEC as that giant that you have to prove that you finally arrived. This is their opportunity against a team like Alabama on a national stage. I really love the stories around this. I really think moving forward, that's something. This is crazy. What if we just only rank the top 4 and just put the other 8 teams in and then chose the matchups by storylines, kind of like what they do in the NCAA tournament. You get those great storylines of this coach came from under this coach and that coach came. That would kind of be dope for the first round matchups if they kind of did it that way. They'll never do it that way. I'm just saying it would be great.
Oh, sure. The storylines would be nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, the Indiana-Alabama storyline is cool. Like, that's like that old money versus new money type thing.
Good call. I like that.
Like Alabama's like, hey, don't forget, like, college football ran through us for the better half of a decade and a half, and Indiana's, on their side, it's like, that's cool. But we are now doing what you used to do.
Yeah.
We're now going undefeated and winning the conference championship.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very, very interesting storyline. I agree.
Somebody in the chat said, who has Texas Tech played? According to them in the Big 12, BYU.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, according to everybody else in the Big 12, they played BYU twice. That's what they're beating their chest about.
Guess we'll all find out here in about 10 days. It's going to be fascinating.
Yes, we will.
Definitely going to be fascinating. Folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. If you haven't gotten enough of me yet, I will be on in a little bit under an hour with IB Nation Sports Beat going live with Sean Stiers, and we got rapid fire afterwards. And then Brian and I will be back tomorrow. We have a special kind of holiday show. It's going to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more lighthearted, just to kind of gear us up for Christmas. So appreciate everybody being in here. On your way out of here, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. But as always, the best way to stay in the loop and the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until next time, that's Sean Davis. I'm Trevor Trowbridge. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.